Yeah, so I'm looking at the chop right now, and as far as I can tell, it doesn't even look like I see a single person in there moving. All of the police, they just pushed everyone out, and the police are now hanging out at the corner of 12th and Pike. With they've got a couple police cars, and then it's just all the cops on bikes, and then the police standing there at the lines. But as far as in the actual chop, it looks completely abandoned now.
Okay, yeah, there you go. Wow. So this, Michelle, check my watch here, but it seems that's about 40 minutes after police moved in or so. So starting to see police take total control of this area. Joseph Suttner, our New Day producer, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your time and hoping that things get a little quieter down in the chop for you and all the business owners and residents as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. Michelle, here at 5:41 this morning, police with another update. 13 total arrests this morning in this single operation after an order from the mayor to disperse. Seattle police telling us officers are enforcing the mayor's executive order with what they're calling a higher level of protective gear. Police utilizing the equipment, they say, because individuals associated with the chop are known to be armed and dangerous and may be associated with shootings, homicides, robberies, assaults, and other violent crimes. I misspoke earlier. 2 victims of fatal shootings, a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old. A 14-year-old was injured in one of 4 shootings there at the chop. Michelle, this is another day for the books when it comes to Seattle's so-called chop zone.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a look back, though, over the last 3 weeks and this progression that led us to this timeline. It's been 3 weeks again since the Capitol Hill organized protest or chop took over several blocks of East Pine Street. That goal was to draw attention to racial injustice and inequities and police brutality. Now, that was followed by calls to defund the Seattle Police Department. And if you remember, Mayor Jenny Durkin came out with the plan. She said she would defund the police department by 5%. But since then, CHOP's creation has really been marred by violence. You just mentioned the 3 young men who have been injured or killed during this time. 4 shootings that injured 6 people, left 2 people dead, and that was the 16-year-old and 19-year-old you just mentioned, Jake. But the city of Seattle tried moving barriers last Friday. They backed off after they were met with some serious protesters. We saw one protester laying down in the street at that time, and then SDOT crews finally managed to take away those barriers yesterday. But then we saw protesters putting up makeshift barriers. Now, the city says they will be moving back into the precinct, but no one has said when that will be. Of course, that was the ultimate goal there. But, up until this time frame, protesters have said that they wouldn't be going anywhere. But we just heard from Joseph Suttner, one of our colleagues at New Day, and he said it looks like CHOP is cleared. He couldn't see one single person moving, he said, except for police there. But I do think, over the last 3 weeks, Jake, we have really seen this area decline. And a lot of people, again, they say, protest peacefully, but we've just seen so many incidents of violence and issues. We saw this data collection by the police department. The police have always have been complaining that they have not been able to really get in and investigate. And they saw at least 65 incidents where there were assaults or burglaries or larceny or whatever. And so it makes you wonder how long they were kind of collecting this data and also making plans to execute what they did this morning. Yeah,
quite the operation as well. And Michelle, it also makes you kind of wonder what is next, right? What's going to come next with the chop as we now get a first look, actually. We had Sky King up getting some signal issues there, but it makes me wonder, Michelle, what's going to be next? Because there has been gestures of goodwill by the mayor, other city leaders, from Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best to really talk with these organizers about maybe a permanent spot for protesters. As we get back to Sky King here, looking overhead at the chop zone. It makes you wonder, Michelle, if there will be that permanent protest area. Will there be an organization or just anything set up, right, to help keep this going?
Well, yeah, and I mean, if there could be a permanent protest zone that was peaceful, that would be one thing. But we have seen that, you know, we can't have nice things. So this is the problem, I think, for a lot of folks, because the chop zone became a dangerous place and a deadly place for people, and young people at that. You know, you hate to see anyone lose their life, but a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old seems so senseless. So it is interesting to see, and I'm wondering where people are right now. We saw them getting pushed south on 12th Street with Michael Crow. Michael Crow talked to a man named Malcolm, who said that he was so sad that his artwork had been destroyed, and you wonder, okay, there are some really nice things about that area. How are people going to get their belongings or some of the things that have been really a landmark for that area for the last 3 weeks? But I'm looking, you know, at some of the images that we're seeing, just a lot of just a mess right there that someone's going to have, the city is going to have to clean up at some point.
Right.
But let's go, now let's check in with Michael Crow. He's been talking with protesters and police as well. So let's check in with Michael.
I mean, with what you, oh, please, go ahead.
What you've just seen is SPD showing force yet again, acknowledging why we do need to abolish them. That they see peaceful protesters sleeping in tents and react like this. Thousands of officers are here right now after a couple of protesters were securing their building that they abandoned, keep making sure that it never caught on fire. In this active form of protest, they respond only in force, never requesting us to leave.
There were the orders to disperse this morning when they were telling people, you know, get up before we move in. That I mean, I just heard. I'm just telling you that's what I personally heard. Can you speak to that a little bit? I mean, they told people.
To my knowledge, there was no actual genuine form of dispersal. The area was surrounded before they even had that motion. Now, if you're a protester who's been maced, tear gassed, flashbanged, incapacitated, and then denied medical service by an organization, by a gang, and you wake up surrounded, what is your reaction? Fear. And this is how they respond. This is unacceptable. This is unacceptable in the worst war zones. This is unacceptable in any nation, and yet we see it right here in Capitol Hill. This is not America. Hell, this looks like Nazi Germany.
Charles, what happened here this morning?
I'd love for anyone else who's also here to get time to speak as well.
Charles, really quick though, I just want to ask. Sorry, it's just you were saying the message, right? The message, the importance of making sure there is equity and that Black Lives Matter. I mean, just talk to me about what needs to happen in this country to make sure people are equal and treated fairly.
The concept, well, I mean, the things that we were working for right now and every day was not just here in Seattle defunding the SPD, but as you see, that is very necessary to defund the SPD, to not weaponize, not militarize these individuals so that we can peacefully protest and uphold our constitutional rights. But beyond that, we need to have qualified immunity repealed. These officers who not just here are forcing us away, but the officers who shoot a pregnant Charlena Lyles in the stomach need to be prosecuted. It's not just equity now. It's not just equity for the citizens of America being black or brown. It's equity for those horrible gangbangers in those blue uniforms. If they hurt us, they need to be prosecuted as well. The reason why they stand here with those smug faces is they know we can't do a damn thing about this. We record their names, we shout them, and they know that there's nothing we can do. I think hostility is going to continue rising until this is the equity.
Believe it, my name's Isaiah.
What will you do next?
We're going to keep protesting. We promised Mayor Durkin we will continue to protest until change is done. On Seattle's United, the Twitter account, @Seattle's United, you see a list of demands that's thousands of Seattleites, cross-referenced with all of the protesters, cross-referenced with large community leaders. Those demands are reasonable. Those demands are having community oversight boards for this precinct so that this shit doesn't happen, to keep them accountable.
Thank you.
The Twitter again is Seattle S United, Seattle's United. Ironically, this movement happened as soon as the demands of the people were posted. Only hours after the demands of the people were posted.
Thank you for sharing that. And just one more time for the folks that have just joined us, your name again?
David Lewis.
David Lewis, thank you. I'm sorry I messed up your name a second ago. There's a lot going on.
This is outrageous. What you see is nothing less than fascism here. Fascism in Seattle, that's what you're seeing.
Thank you.
They're interviewing a little bit of
So we're still out here. If you've got us, guys, we're going to take a step this way, of course. Protesters have been pushed out of the CHOP area, formerly known as Chaz. You can see police have significantly lowered the number that are holding that intersection there. 12th and Pike is where we are. There was a much stronger force here a couple minutes ago, but kind of as they pushed through, once they held that line, a much smaller number of police have remained here. We've seen them kind of push off that way. In a moment, we're going to take a look as we go away, but they were telling people disperse. They were saying head south on 12th this way, or you will be subject to arrest. We saw pepper spray. We saw cops kind of pushing the line, pulling up tents and stuff as they moved through to take this CHOP occupied area. So that is where we're at right now here, early in the morning here in Capitol Hill near the CHOP area. The question now, of course, is what happens next? Will people try to reoccupy it? Will they try to occupy another area around here? Obviously, people are not happy with this and continue to protest and intend to continue protesting here.
Yeah, Michael, before you go, I want to see if you can you hear me, Michael?
Yeah, I've got
listening to David and hearing him call, the police department gangbangers and saying that they need to be dismantled because once again they are showing force. The police department has really come out strongly saying that they are wearing this extra protective gear to protect themselves because of the violence that they have seen in CHOP. Has anyone been able to speak of not just the message, that perhaps the message has been lost in CHOP, or that perhaps there were shootings that shouldn't have happened there?
Well, we kind of addressed that earlier, and we've been asking about that as well, right? I mean, that is absolutely a perspective some people hold, is that the police themselves are a gang, right? And we have seen police using pepper spray and tactics to kind of move people back. They did give an order to disperse before that. I heard it. They were standing there for 10-ish minutes, approximately, maybe a little bit longer, telling people this is an order to disperse. Leave now, head south down 12th, or you will be arrested. People did not want to do that, a certain number of them, and stayed there and tried to kind of fortify those tents and hang back. And those people were forced back physically. We saw that happen, right? We also know over the past couple weeks that there have been some incidences of violence here, right? Several shootings. We have heard it. We have reported on those things. So I'll say both of those are perspectives, right? We have seen and heard of complaints against officers that have been filed and are being investigated. We have also seen these issues of violence here in the CHOP. So, and in so many things, it is complicated. But we are seeing people forced out here. I mean, these are folks that we're standing here. Sorry, we're just a little distracted there. But I mean, that is what we've seen, though. So.
Yeah, and Michael, you said people don't know where they're going, but are they moving, or are they just staying where you are right now?
The small group that remains here, maybe 24, they are staying here. I mean, they're screaming at the cops. They are kind of hanging a line here. It kind of looks like they're rallying a little bit and coming back together, and they've just kind of started chanting again here and are getting back up close to the police. The group that's here seems to be kind of hanging out and intending to stay here for a little bit. The urgency from the police to push them further seems to have dropped after they hit Pike here. They do have a police cordon to block the other way. That is where they were trying to funnel people out and not let them back in. But they do not seem to really have the numbers or the onus to continue forcing people back quite as quickly as they did out of that core at Pine.
I'm just wondering, the people who are in that area who are just doing business as usual might be a little taken back this morning. Michael Crow, thank you so much for your reporting. We're going to keep checking in with you, but I hope you continue to be safe. We've been mentioning that the police department has tried to stay ahead of why they were moving people out of CHOP this morning. In fact, we were looking at a tweet now from the Seattle Police Department, just tweeted moments ago, and we've been mentioning this today, but they said officers enforcing today's order are wearing a higher level of protective gear. Police are utilizing this equipment because individuals associated with the CHOP are known to be armed and dangerous, may be associated with shootings, homicides, robberies, assaults, and other violent crimes. And in just within the last 2 minutes, they have again reshared a video that they call Violence in the CHOP, where it's a mashup of all of the, or not all of the, but some of the violence that has happened with armed people who are in the CHOP over the last few weeks, and captured on open source video recorded in that area. So as Michael said, these are two very different perspectives, and hearing that the protesters are not, some protesters say that they are not going to give up this fight, and they are saying that they are Seattle United. So of course, this has been a developing situation, Jake, but here it is almost 6 o'clock, and we know that police started arriving around like 4 o'clock into the CHOP area. Yeah,
and with respect to that gentleman that Michael was just talking to, our Joseph Sutner, producer of New Day, who lives basically above the CHOP, says he definitely heard police asking and demanding protesters disperse that area, acting on an executive order that the mayor signed overnight to clear that area. Mayor Durkin issuing a 48-hour public safety emergency order to clear the East Precinct Cal Anderson Park area or be arrested. And we have seen, according to Seattle police, at least 13 arrests this morning alone as protesters meet those officers with resistance. We have seen some familiar sights this morning, as we saw, Michelle, early on in the George Floyd protests. Haven't seen any tear gas or anything like that, but certainly police using any tool in their toolbox they can to clear protesters out safely and effectively. And not only are we seeing them remove protesters, but we're seeing them round up tents and really just clearing that area out of everything. Bottom left corner of your screen is a great Sky King shot this morning there at 12th and Pine Street. We have our teams safely there on the ground. Things starting to look a little different already, Michelle, if I might say so. Already seeing tents and barricades at least starting to be moved as the area starts to slowly go back to what it looked like before all of this. But as much as the protesters we've talked to say that police are destroying their artwork, it is beautiful art. It's very beautiful art, but it's in the middle of a city street. And we've heard from city leaders recently that police cars can't get through, fire trucks can't get through. Response times, according to the chief, have basically tripled in time. So people like our Joseph Sutner there don't feel safe in Capitol Hill, one of the most beautiful historic neighborhoods in the entire city. So this is yet another point in the timeline for Capitol Hill that we are watching unfold here this morning.
Well, and you talk about, Jake, police and fire not being able, emergency crews not being able to get into the CHOP zone. The police have been collecting data on how many investigations they've been able to kind of pursue during this time, and they have released this in an extensive and lengthy proclamation, the 48-hour emergency proclamation, and they said that at least 65 offenses have happened in this CHOP zone, from aggravated assault to assault offenses to disorderly conduct, homicide, at least 2 incidents of that, larceny, theft. I mean, it goes on and on and on. It makes you wonder how long it took to put this plan in place, what kind of thought went behind it, because we did see officers out potentially, pushing people back with their bikes and using pepper spray. But I think the message from Seattle police and the city has been very targeted, and has also been trying to get ahead of some of the things that people may be criticizing the city for. For example, the city already having a video of CHOP violence edited and ready to go and ready to tweet this morning, or having, the data that at least 65 incidents have happened. It makes you wonder, okay, what plans are in place next for taking back the East Precinct? Because this was, I think that there were people who were obviously surprised this morning waking up in the CHOP zone and having police tell them to disperse. So it does make me wonder how long this has been in motion by the police and by the city.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, if you're just now waking up with us here on King 5 Mornings on your July 1st Wednesday, we have breaking news in Seattle. Seattle police officers in large numbers have surrounded the so-called CHOP zone in an effort to take back the East Precinct at 12th and Pine in the great city of Seattle. The mayor has signed a 48-hour public safety emergency order for anyone and everyone to clear the CHOP area or be arrested. Police in riot gear have been confronting protesters who are refusing to leave. So far, SPD says they've made 13 arrests, but we've watched with every minute that passes police moving in closer. We have several crews on the ground this morning for complete coverage of this developing news. Kira Alfalin is among them. Kira, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. So we're actually here at 12th and Pike still, where protesters have been moved out of the CHOP zone. We're here with Amari Salisbury this morning. You have been live streaming this. You have been here with protesters basically the whole way. Tell us more about kind of what you saw in there this morning.
Yeah, well, I mean, we got a lot of chatter that something was going to happen this morning. And then on the police scanner, they said that a convoy was on the way. And at that point, we just knew that something was happening. A few minutes later, it came out, and there was officers there on coming from the north on Pine and coming from the west, the north on 12th and from the west on Pine. They gave an order to disperse. They a few minutes there, they mentioned that Cal Anderson Park was closed, so I don't even know what action might be down there. And they said that Mayor Durkin signed an order at 2 a.m. Not really sure about that. And they began to just move people back. They met very little resistance. We didn't see much force. It looked like the discharge of a rubber bullet when they were very first there by 12th Avenue Arts, and then affected an arrest. It looked like some pepper spray was used. But to be honest, the Seattle Police Department basically reclaimed the precinct in less than 30 minutes and at 5 feet at a time with the bicycle officers out in front.
So they've been moved out of the CHOP zone now. Are you hearing that they plan to stay here for now?
I think that it's very early morning. I think that the choppers that are still here, a lot of them are disoriented out here. But the ones that are here are saying that they plan to hold the line. And I mean, the irony of this very well might be is another barricade, but this time manned by the Seattle Police Department.
All right, thank you so much for talking with us this morning. We know that you have to get back to your life, so we really appreciate it out here, so thank you very much. Thank you. All right, the situation continues to evolve out here. Protesters have been moved out of the CHOP zone here. Once we have any more on what's going on out here, of course, we will bring you the very latest right here on King 5 News. For now, I'm live here in Seattle, Kiara Alfalin, King 5 News.
All right, Kira, thank you. This is about the best view we have had yet of what you're seeing unfold right now. This is our Sky King shot there at just outside the East Precinct, and we are, again, watching police move in closer. As Omari just said, they're holding the line and seeing far fewer protesters now as we saw even 20 or 30 minutes ago. But really, in less than an hour, we have seen police arrive on scene, fortify around the East Precinct and the so-called CHOP zone, and take back the area. Michelle, the police chief this morning, Carmen Best, also on scene, saying enough is enough.
Yeah, and she has released a statement as well. We've seen her on the scene there. We are taking a live look at some live streams that are coming in. This is, excuse me, can someone tell me what this is exactly?
Yeah, we've got the live streams, Michelle, on screen
Okay.
from the cameras on the buildings above.
Okay. Sorry about that. We were looking at officers on top of buildings and manning them as well. But I'm looking at a live stream also on Converge Media. This morning we've been taking a live look at that group for a while over the last 3 weeks, and we're seeing still some protesters trying to argue or have some sort of confrontation with bike officers as well. But this has been a very busy morning, Jake. Here it is 6:04, and we know that police have spent about the last 2 hours getting ready to, empty out CHOP. People have now moved on. We've heard from people saying that they're going to hold the line. Police and the city have come out with a response, a collective response saying, okay, we are moving in this way because there have been so many offenses. This has been an area of lawlessness for the last several days, and now they have taken it back over. But anyway, we are continuing to watch this live stream, and I'll get back with you on what I'm seeing here, Jake.
Yep, sounds good. And it's interesting too, Michelle, we've talked about this before, but those series of live shots are actually people posting live streams from their homes and from their businesses. It's been an interesting quirk in all this, a live look at all times, basically. But we are seeing a lot less activity than we were a few minutes ago in terms of resistance from protesters. And I think it's worth mentioning as well that a lot of people there on the ground responding on social media as well. We have some of those responses now, people witnessing this, responding to what they're seeing here. This is one video that was just shot from scene from a gentleman there who is he's saying police takeover. You can see he has a view there of police moving in. Seen a lot of this, including from our own Michael Crow, who's down there on scene. And this is some of the most resistance we've seen throughout this early morning operation here. And I think also worth noting that the mayor and police chief both issuing statements this morning. And if I may, from Police Chief Carmen Best, she does, again, extend an olive branch, as she has done throughout this whole process. She says she is trying to support peaceful demonstrations. She says Black Lives Matter. She says she wants to help people propel this movement forward with meaningful change in the community. But enough is enough. The CHOP has become lawless and brutal, she says. 4 shootings, 2 fatals, robberies, assaults, violence, 65 separate documented cases in the CHOP, as we look at Police Chief Carmen Best right there in the middle of your screen. So we're also working to get her in front of a camera this morning. Michelle, it feels relatively calm at this point this morning. You have to imagine that police are relatively satisfied with where things stand right now as the police chief walks back inside the precinct.
Yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on Carmen Best making an appearance, and hopefully we can grab her. But let's recap what we have seen just in the last 3 weeks since CHOP became CHOP, the Capitol Hill Organized Protest Zone, as we have been calling it. It took over several blocks of East Pine Street. And the goal, again, was to draw attention to racial injustice and police brutality and inequities across the board. That was also followed by calls to defund the police department. We saw Mayor Jenny Durkin come out with a plan to perhaps defund the police department by 5%. A lot of people said that wasn't enough. They wanted to see 50%. But since then, CHOP's creation has really been troubled. It has been marred by violence. We have reported on 4 shootings that injured 6 people and left 2 people dead. And those 2 people dead are young people. They were 19 years old and 16 years old. There was also a 14-year-old who was injured as well. The city of Seattle tried to remove barriers last Friday, so just a handful of days ago, but they had to back off Friday morning because they were met with protesters, and it got heated on Friday. There was a protester who laid in the street protecting the barriers as city crews try to move in with a front loader. But SDOT crews finally managed to take those barriers away yesterday. Then we saw protesters put up makeshift barriers as well. And this is when we got to this point today. The city says they will be moving back into that precinct, but no one has really said when that will be, just as no one really said when police were going to remove people from the CHOP zone. And just looking at how things went down this morning and continue to evolve, they did it. They had a plan. They had a lot of documentation ready to support their cause and support the argument that this is what needed to happen. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves in the coming days, because we know protesters have said that they were going to hold the line, perhaps move somewhere else, and also police still have to take back their precinct, Jake.
Yeah, no, they definitely do. It's been since June the 8th when Seattle police abandoned that precinct. Let's get down to Michael Crow live on the scene, as he has been for so many days. Michael, the whole goal by Seattle police was to clear the CHOP, get back in the East Precinct. Are you seeing police get back in the precinct?
It sure looks like they are back in and have reclaimed CHOP. That's what I'm seeing. We just moved a little bit down from 12th. This is 11th and Pike. You can see another line of officers holding a line here. Not any protesters here. Two guys just walked up, but everybody is up at 12th. There may be a dozen or so people that remain after being pushed out of the CHOP. But you can see the folks here in this tactical gear and that protective equipment. that are holding this line. Nobody, of course, is allowed in this way. We are right now just kind of going on a walk to just look at the other edges here, because we all went south on 12th as police pushed people out after that dispersal order. So we're kind of just checking out the situation around Capitol Hill here. This road, of course, is closed. We are standing in the middle of it. I've mentioned a couple times police have, a block in several directions here, that they're kind of, a one-way street, right? People can leave, but they're not letting folks back in. So you can kind of see down here, that is kind of the area where, if you zoom a little bit past these officers, you can see that there is a SPD van backing up, some bike officers assembling there, a SWAT truck that is parked. That is right at the edge of Cal Anderson Park. That is another kind of core area of this chop zone that developed over the last couple weeks. If I'm not turned around from the last time I was here a couple days ago, it is the area where that no cop co-op was, and where people were kind of distributing and had tents and that whole kind of street fair vibe that we've talked about during the day. I am curious what is happening there, because there were a lot of tents on Cal Anderson's actual soccer kind of green space there. That is what we cannot personally see from this vantage point, other than the assembling officers and that SWAT truck. There may be something going on over there still, but certainly the edges that we have been able to access here as we were cleared out of the area have been significantly quieter. Like I said, not a single protester in sight here making contact with police. That is the situation here. Quiet compared to the last couple hours. If you look to the right, you can see there is still that small number. Mark, you want to take a look right there? That small number of people that kind of remain and are engaging with police this morning. But certainly the numbers are significantly different than we saw, in those nights leading up to police leaving the precinct. That sounded like a flashbang to me, and you can see smoke and gas going off down there. I think I should say smoke. It is a very long ways away, but that sounded like a dispersal device going off there. That would probably be 2 blocks away, kind of the edge of Cal Anderson. Yeah, just one there, so
Michael,
kind of waiting to see what happens.
Michael, have you seen any tear gas or pepper spray used against protesters in this particular situation?
I have seen pepper spray. I have not personally seen any tear gas. Of course, we know that the city council limited SPD's use of that. We have seen pepper spray. There was a guy up there that had gotten hit right in the face with some pepper spray. I've seen a couple other people get pepper sprayed while they were really in that kind of core central push right in front of the East Precinct. So pepper spray is a yes. I have not seen any tear gas. And that thing you just heard, I think, was kind of a smoke dispersion. It didn't look to hang in the air the way tear gas does that I've seen before.
Right, and you have been all too familiar with the tear gas, my friend. Thanks. We'll keep checking back in. Appreciate the update there as things start to calm down, relatively peaceful, and since the way that it was several minutes ago, where we now look on your screen. This is file video from about a half hour ago when police began to push toward protesters in a very coordinated response there at the CHOP, pushing back these demonstrators one by one. Force was used in several cases. 13 arrests at least have been made so far. Tents have been cleared, and at this very moment, our own crew is being told to clear out as well. A very planned and coordinated operation getting underway at about 5 a.m. local time here in Seattle. Seattle police also updating us via Twitter. And in one of those tweets a short while ago, they indicated that police are back in a higher level of protective gear. They say police were utilizing the equipment because individuals associated with the CHOP are known to be armed, dangerous, and may be associated with shootings, homicides, robberies, assaults, and other violent crimes. 65 separate crimes documented, at least in the CHOP, according to Seattle police. I believe this is another live look here. Protesters are still giving police an earful and telling them how they feel about police moving back into the so-called Capitol Hill organized protest zone. Michelle, June the 8th, almost a full month ago, a week shy, police were essentially pushed out of the East Precinct. The Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best said it wasn't her decision. The mayor said it was hers. That was a point of contention. But nonetheless, here we are this morning. It seems everyone on the same page, ready to take back the East Precinct once and for all.
Yeah, absolutely, Jake. And we've been mentioning this morning, but you just mentioned those 65 offenses. And I think that goes along with being on the same page, having that documentation ready to go to share with the public so that the police and that the mayor and the city could come up with a plan to say, this is why we are making this effort to take back CHOP. So when we were looking at these offenses, these are just the ones that they have been able to track. So we're looking at aggravated assault, also burglary, larceny. Don't forget homicide. We have lost 2 lives during these last 3 weeks, and they were of a 16-year-old and a 19-year-old boy. We know that a 14-year-old was also severely injured. There's been motor vehicle theft, property offenses, like destruction of property, things like that. When we talk to business owners there, in the beginning, we saw a lot of business owners, and still do, wanting to help in the peaceful efforts. But then there have also been business owners who have said, listen, we have been scared. We don't think that this is a safe area for us as people and for our businesses. And so they have moved forward and said that they were going to sue the city because they didn't feel safe. However, they felt like the Black Lives Matter movement needs to continue. So there has been such a diverse group, a diverse look at perspectives over the last 3 weeks, right? And I think that when we look at the city's response, the police's response, they have really tried to come up with some sort of planned effort this morning, and one backed by research and data in their eyes, to let people know that it was time to move forward and clear the CHOP. But we just heard from Michael Crow saying that the East Precinct appears to be back in the hands of police. Is that what you were hearing, Jake?
Yep, we are also hearing from our Michael Crow there that police are getting back into the precinct that they had essentially vacated for fear early on that it was going to burn to the ground, that the protesters at the time, very violent, a lot of pent-up anger, and there was an order from high above at the mayor's office to evacuate that precinct. But here we are, since June the 8th, police back in this morning. Also, just a side observation here, those rainbow crosswalks in Michelle in Seattle, this is a sign of unity, a sign of acceptance. Today, the sign of the site of an organized effort by Seattle police to push back and retake that area under the direction of an order signed overnight by Mayor Durkin, an emergency public safety order ordering everyone to disperse and vacate that area for at least 48 hours. You've got to think as well, after the 48 hours is up, that there's going to have to be some sort of a constant police presence there sort of guarding that area, because you've got to wonder if protesters are going to try to make another run at going back and organizing the CHOP that they've been holding for so long.
Yeah, we just heard from a couple of people this morning who said that they're going to hold the line and they're going to keep protesting until Seattle dismantles its police department. And that's another thing, hearing from Carmen Best, she has really been open and trying to be forward about how she feels, and so has the mayor, Jenny Durkin. But the CHOP, she said, has I should say this is from Carmen Best, saying that the CHOP has become lawless and brutal. 4 shootings, 2 fatal robberies, assaults, violence, countless property crimes have all occurred. In the meantime, both the mayor and the chief have said Black Lives Matter, and they support peaceful demonstrations. So it would be interesting to see if these protesters hold the line, if they can continue to, or if they can move forward doing it peacefully, Jake.
Yeah, and the CHOP has really become a point of conversation, contention for everybody. I mean, you live in Snohomish County, Skagit, Pierce, Thurston counties. Everybody is watching what's happening in Seattle with so many questions and so many questions about why don't the police just go in and just take over the CHOP and clear it out. Well, it's when you're on the ground, it's really not that simple. I mean, this is an area that has been built up to almost just a giant encampment in a way. And you can't just go in. We've seen the resistance that these protesters have put up to police even this morning. The reason police do these tactical operations at the hours of 5 a.m. or 4:30 like we saw this morning is because that's about the quietest time of day by and large. Looking live here at some live streams overhead. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, you've got to say police have given these protesters every single chance to get out peacefully. And now they're moved to use force yet again. And it appears the operation is successful at this very moment that we've seen so far, Michelle.
Yeah, and we just heard from Michael Crow a few minutes ago. When we were taking his live shot, we heard a loud bang, and he said it appeared to be some sort of flashbang, maybe 2 blocks from where he was. And I'm wondering if it is because of this. Seattle police just tweeted out 25 seconds ago that officers are continuing to give dispersal orders and are moving remaining groups north through Cal Anderson Park. So, and that is what we are seeing right now. So we know that officers are continuing to try to give these dispersal orders and are moving people, again, the remaining groups north through Cal Anderson Park. And you know, we've heard from protesters who were on the move this morning saying that they did not hear those dispersal orders coming down at 5 o'clock in the morning. But we heard from other people like our colleague, Joseph Suttner, who is a New Day producer, who said that he could clearly hear those orders coming down in the morning. So maybe it's a different situation when you're on the ground and and the sound doesn't travel in the same way. But again, police say they are trying to give those dispersal orders first and are removing those remaining groups. But let's try actually to talk to Joseph Suttner, our colleague again, a New Day producer who lives right above the chop zone. Joseph, good morning, and thank you for joining us again. Tell us what you're seeing now.
Good morning. So I'm just, I live between Pine and Pike on 12th, right across from the police station. And so right now I'm looking out my window. To my right, I see the chop. I don't see a single person in it. It's completely empty. It's looking pretty messy because, police have just come through. And then if I look to my left at the intersection of 12th and Pike, I see maybe like 20 cops, many of them on bicycles. They've formed a line on 12th, so no one can come through. But there's not too many protesters out there now. So the mood seems fairly calm at the moment.
No, that's good news. Yeah, I'm sorry, Michelle, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say have there been warnings for people not to come out this morning? I mean, is there anyone out there who's trying to operate as normal? I'm thinking like maybe perhaps businesses or just people who live in the neighborhood.
Well, it's 6:22 right now, so normally, Capitol Hill doesn't get going quite this early.
Sure.
But, I'm like, most of the businesses in this area, honestly, have been pretty boarded up and not too busy, I think, over the last week. The mood has really changed here. I think before it seemed sort of, like street festival-like. Like I would see lots of people kind of coming in to just check it out and see what the whole chop thing is about. But over the last week, that has really shifted away. There's been hardly any people here, it's mostly just been the people living in the tents in the chop. So, no one said, like, don't come out of your apartment or anything, but, it's been fairly quiet, and I think it's probably going to stay that way now that police have shut this down.
We're hearing from police, Joseph, that they are urging or pushing protesters to the north end of Cal Anderson Park, where you're looking there on the left side of your screen, everybody. That's the north end. It's always an open area. It's usually full of a lot of folks. Joseph, are you seeing people filling that north end of Cal Anderson Park from your window?
So I cannot see that far. I can basically just see up to Pine and 12th. But, as far as what I'm seeing hardly any people. I think there's maybe 10 or 15 people that I can see that aren't police from where I am right now. So it seems like a lot of people have definitely left this area, and there's I can't see a single person in the chop area right now.
Okay.
Jake, I will just jump in here because the Seattle police just tweeted that the group is currently moving past 11th and Olive.
And that would essentially mean they're moving out of the chop this morning.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a sigh of relief, I'm sure, from a lot of you at home to hear the news from Joseph and our crews on the ground that things are relatively peaceful, considering what we've seen, 13 arrests so far. I suppose you could say that it appears this entire effort has been successful. Joseph, I mean, what do you think from your window there? It looks like they've regained the East Precinct.
Yeah, I think it's too early to say, exactly what the outcome will be. I think several residents of the CHOP and of people who live in apartment buildings here kind of had gotten wind of something maybe happening last night, so we've all been kind of bracing ourselves. But I think, just moving forward, probably the city council, the mayor, police will have to meet with the, leaders of the CHOP to kind of have more conversations about what the future of policing in our city looks like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Michelle, it makes you.
Something else that we have talked about. Oh, sorry, Jake. Joseph mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I know that a lot of people are just waking up at 6:25 and saying, "Okay, what is happening right now?" Joseph, if you can kind of just speak to the mixed emotions that maybe the neighborhood and business owners feel about CHOP, and now that it's being dismantled. It wasn't just a clear we want to get CHOP out, right?
Yeah, it's been a lot of mixed feelings, I think, for the people that live here. A lot of people, really wanted the CHOP to be a safe place where people could talk about issues of racial equity and things like that. But, over the last week, as violence started to break out, that kind of, I think, gave people pause about, just how viable will this space be as is. And, after that shooting where the 16-year-old boy was shot and killed, which was right in front of my apartment, I think people were really starting to fear public safety. And I think a lot of people, including me, didn't feel like the people in the CHOP were necessarily being violent, but we were fearing that if other people came in that had maybe differing views, that is when violence would break out. And that's what seems like what happened the other day. So,
yeah, Joseph, thanks for all that you've done. It's been an interesting few weeks for you, I'm sure. I guess before you go, just while I've got you, what have the last few weeks been like? Have you felt safe leaving your house? Have you felt like you've been getting squeezed out of your own neighborhood?
Well, in a way, but New Day, we've been all working from home, so I haven't had to leave my apartment.
True.
So I felt safe in here, which has been good. But, rather than going to the grocery store, like we're having that get delivered, things like that. I have not left my apartment since, well, it's been a while. I couldn't even tell you the last time I left my apartment. So, we're staying inside. I mean, I live high up, so I'm not too afraid, but it's been very, it's not normal to have people shot and killed in front of your apartment in this neighborhood. I've never felt nervous about things like that happening before this CHOP.
Okay.
So that's, been a change.
Yeah, unnerving to say the least.
Yeah.
Let's get back up to Sky King now as we wake you up here on a Wednesday morning with the latest from the CHOP in Seattle. You're looking now live at the north end of Cal Anderson Park. The playfields on the left, the center of so many protests and gatherings in the city of Seattle. Now the site of the latest operation by Seattle police to push through in the early morning hours, clear the CHOP, and regain control of the SPD East Precinct. Crews on the ground reporting that police do appear to be re-entering the East Precinct in large, the most since June 8th. They are still, police, moving people back, away, trying to push the line, hold the line, as they say. All of this happening under a public safety emergency order signed by Mayor Durkin overnight to vacate the area around the East Precinct for at least the next 48 hours, Michelle. And have to say, a sense of relief, I think, from everyone watching that police were able to do this with relatively, little force compared to what we've seen in the past several weeks. And again, up in the right-hand corner, police still holding that line. We have several crews down there talking to folks, protesters, many of them angry that police are doing what they're doing. But bottom line is, this is a public street that has been seized by protesters, citizens. It has been lawless. There have been a number of shootings, 4 of them, 2 teenagers, a 16-year-old, a 19-year-old, both dead. because of violence within the CHOP. And as the police chief said this morning, enough is enough. Again, if you are just waking up this morning, Seattle police now regaining control of its East Precinct in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle, regaining that precinct and clearing out the CHOP for the first time since June 8th. Michelle?
Yeah, Jake. So again, here we are. It's 6:30 in the morning. We know that police started arriving on scene a little bit after 4 o'clock this morning. And if people are just waking up with us, we want to give them kind of a recap of what we have seen this morning. So the CHOP looks a lot different right now than it did just a couple of hours ago. It has now been cleared by police. Police moved in. They pushed out protesters starting around maybe 5 o'clock this morning. They used their bikes to push protesters back. We also saw some pepper spray used as well. This has been a concerted effort between the police and the city of Seattle. They released a 48-hour emergency proclamation, as Jake mentioned, and then as they also released a lot of data and some video about why they felt the CHOP should be cleared, including at least 65 offenses that the police have been able to track over the last 3 weeks. This morning, we know that at least 13 arrests have been made, and police say that if protesters continue to come back, they will be arrested as well. Michael Crow has been there all morning long. He started his morning out at 12th and Pine and moved along with protesters and has been speaking with people. Michael, last time we caught up with you, it appeared that there was a flashbang in the background, probably a couple blocks away from you. Where are you now, and what are you seeing?
Yeah, and I should note, really, we were really far away, but it was a small pop. I mean, could it have been a firework? Maybe. It looked like a flashbang, but we're just at such a distance here as police push people out of the area. We're at Pine and Broadway now, right? This is the line. We were actually just pushed back by these police another block here. We were up at Nagel there. You can look all the way down, though, as my photographer Mark here zooms in. I mean, this is the central core, right? This was the main drag of CHOP, and I don't see a single protester, a single person left in sight here in the area. You can see there are some trucks up there where the barricades were right in front of the East Precinct. I don't see a lot of activity. It's just very, very quiet. People have been pushed out of this area, after weeks of occupying it. I will say the area we're standing here, where we were just pushed back a block, almost entirely, I would say nearly exclusively media that was pushed back here a block. I don't see anyone really engaging with police from a protest, but we were all just pushed back another block here from Nagel, where you can access the edge of Cal Anderson Park and kind of walk around. We can see a little activity on the far side of Cal Anderson. I cannot tell you what it is right now because that is pretty far and away over the way there. So this group of television reporters and photographers that have been standing here, we were just pushed back over the last few minutes. So we've lost kind of our vantage point on Cal Anderson, and we don't really know what's happening there. But we're kind of walking around the outside edge here to get a view of what's going on. I will note for folks that are just joining us at this hour, a notably different scene than what we saw even an hour ago, right? With pepper spray and large numbers of police all pushing protesters out of that central occupied area back up there in CHOP that looks to have been taken by police now. So this is the scene that we're watching, and very quiet here. We're kind of hearing the choppers over front, and we're starting to see a little bit of traffic as people wake up and head to work. But the question remains, right, of what happens next. We've seen a small group, maybe a dozen, maybe 2 dozen, of protesters that were engaging with police over at 12th and Pike after they were forced out, and they've kind of been making a ring too. We lost contact with them, but they were just kind of checking out other spots too, and engaging with police as we went. But police are not letting anyone in. They're not letting media. They're not letting anybody get closer than this right now, as they kind of check out this area and make sure that it remains clear right now.
Hey, Michael, before you go, I just want to share with you some information that the police just tweeted out. They said that officers are continuing to give these dispersal orders and are checking the restrooms at Cal Anderson, for example. They will be clearing that north end of the park very soon, but they're also thanking individuals affiliated with the CHOP who have assisted officers in encouraging people to safely leave the area. Just in your experience in being there, have you seen people inside CHOP working with police at this point, or has it been just, a contentious situation all around this morning?
I think that's a fair point. It's a little hard to identify that when you're in the thick of it, right? Because the people that are working with police are a little bit quieter, and it's not necessarily so visual and stands out in a crowd, right? Than the people that are in their face and engaging and getting shoved and pushing and that kind of thing. I have seen some people. I mean, we saw a traffic cone go flying when we were over at 12th and Pine. Somebody threw a traffic cone right at the line of SPD, and immediately there was a woman there on a megaphone yelling, "Don't throw stuff, this is peaceful, don't throw stuff." I don't know how many people listened to her necessarily, because right after we watched as a couple of guys took 2 porta potties and knocked them over to try and make a barricade, which, you know, they spilled everywhere and was gross. But yeah, I wouldn't doubt it that people are working. I mean, I think there is a contingent here, right, that is you know, saying there was a dispersal order and it's time to go. And a lot of people have left. That's the thing. You know, there's a very core group knocking around here still, but it's not like there's hundreds of people kind of milling about still in terms of protesters looking for somewhere to go. I think a lot of people have left.
All right, Michael, thank you so much for your reporting this morning, and please continue to be safe, you and Mark out there, but we certainly appreciate your reporting. Jake,
yeah, and in recent days, it is that beauty and the message that was so clear in the early days of CHOP has been all but lost. Let's get down to Kiera Alfalin. They're live as well outside the East Precinct. Kiera, what are you seeing from your vantage point there?
Yeah, good morning. Well, we're still here live just outside of 12th or near 12th and Pike right now, where many protesters have left. There's just a small group left behind. The Seattle Department of Transportation is now here. Police are here as well. It seems like they're coming through. Basically, they've moved protesters out of the CHOP zone. Pretty peaceful right now. We just got, you know, some demonstrators who are here. They don't quite want to leave yet, but they all have been moved out of the CHOP zone. We know that several arrests were made, more than a dozen arrests. At least 3 of those arrests happened here at 12th and Pike. So there was some resistance this morning as police moved those protesters out. Other protesters decided to peacefully walk out and leave on their own. But this is the situation right now. We've still got a couple people left behind. Police are here just making sure no one enters the CHOP zone. They've moved those demonstrators out. Again, a few still here, and we did see a few walk a little while ago and walk towards 11, so we know that some protesters are moving to a different location. But this is the scene right now. If anything changes, we will let you know the very latest right here on King 5 News. For now, I'm live here in Seattle. Kiera Alfalin, King 5 News.
All right, Kiera, thank you. Please be safe. Back to Sky King now, where I'm not sure if this was built before the operation this morning, but you're seeing several people. I can't tell if many of those are police officers, but they're gathering here at the opposite end of Cal Anderson Park. You've got the East Precinct on one side, Cal Anderson Park, the play fields in between, and then now this gathering area here where it appears they are pushing protesters out. It appears that some of these are police officers. The order by Mayor Durkin signed overnight was for any and all people to disperse, clear out of the CHOP for at least the next 48 hours. Chief Carmen Best saying she too, in a statement this morning, saying she too wants Black Lives Matter to continue. She wants the movement to move forward, she says, for meaningful change, but enough is enough. Making the point that there were 4 shootings, 2 fatal. There were robberies, assaults, and violence. This was a lawless area. If there was a crime, police were asking protesters to move the injured out to the outskirts of the protest so they could be met with medics. They couldn't get anybody in the CHOP. It was just becoming something different. And here we are now this morning. Word on the ground from Michael Crow and others that Michelle, police have re-entered the East Precinct.
Right. And Jake, I just want to mention something about Cal Anderson Park. That officers are trying to clear out Cal Anderson Park right now, but there is a difficult situation out there right now. They just tweeted this out seconds ago, saying that they are calling now for Seattle Fire to show up at Cal Anderson Park because apparently a woman started going into labor on the east side of the park right now, just moments ago. So that is the situation there. In the meantime, they're still trying to clear out the park. But again, a woman just went into labor at Cal Anderson Park.
Oh boy. Okay. Got to remember this birthday. If you're just waking up this morning here on King 5 Mornings, we are so glad you're with us here. It is your first day of July, and Seattle police now, for the first time since June the 8th, Seattle police have moved in to the Seattle Police East Precinct, and the CHOP is no more. Let's get to Andre Taylor, who has been a very outspoken leader since the start. Andre, you got me this morning?
Yes.
What are your thoughts here?
Good morning.
Looking at this unfold here on your screen as they clear out the CHOP.
You know, a lot of times you want to be right about a lot of things. I wanted to be wrong about this particular situation with CHOP. I really wanted to be wrong. I really wanted them to ascend above a place, and as I've been explaining to many of them for now a couple of weeks, that CHOP should never be considered a place but an idea. And to see what's going on now is a manifestation of some of the conversations that I have had with a lot of their quote-unquote leadership, you know. And, you know, it's devastating to see that, you know, this missed opportunity will only be known as a place of where death occurred, where 2 people died. I haven't gotten an update on the 14-year-old was this year.
Yeah, I can hear it. I can hear it in your voice, Andre. I just have to ask though. So this didn't turn out the way you wanted it to. I'm curious, when did that happen? What should have happened, or what did happen to erase that message and send this into a negative direction?
Well, the first time that there was violence there should have been an awakening and a murder around there. There should have been an awakening, and that awakening should have focused on those deaths as well as George Floyd's untimely death. I think that if they would have pivoted to those deaths as strongly as the George Floyd's death, I think that Seattle would have continued to support this group. But for there to be continual shootings and deaths consistently, we just couldn't allow, you know, this space to continue. It was just, listen, it didn't end how it started, and that's the tragedy of the situation.
And don't you agree that there's a better way, right? I mean, the Black Lives Matter movement obviously has a very clear message. It's obviously very important. It obviously should continue. But blocking off city streets, there's got to be a better way. And I'm curious your thoughts about what that should be, and perhaps what the mayor and police chief are telling you they want to do now moving forward.
Well, of course there's a better way, but you know, what I don't want to do is discourage young folks from having a voice, but to try to learn from this experience and, you know, how to navigate a little bit better when you're dealing with systems and the like. My organization, Not This Time, showed that better way by leading Washington State and becoming the first and only state with a police accountability law. We did the very opposite of allowing any violence around us. We made sure it didn't happen. And that was a part of the messaging as we were moving forward. So a better way, we not only showed a better way, but we showed the results of a better way. And that was some of the conversations that I was trying to have with them at CHOP. What I did not know as of late is that a lot of the people that were at CHOP were not from our city. They were coming in from Chicago, from Georgia, from New York, from Portland, and I did not know that. And so, of course, they wouldn't understand the work that has been done here in our city and state. They were oblivious when I was talking to them about some of the things that they could do, and I've given them examples of those things through, you know, our own organization as we have moved forward. And they were oblivious. And so I was wondering, how can these people not understand this, know this? Until I realized a lot of them weren't from Seattle.
Right. Andre, real quick, I believe Michelle has a question for you.
Sure.
Well, I have a couple of questions, but since you just mentioned that people were coming in from outside of Seattle to join CHOP, what about some of the accusations that right-wing extremists were a part of, you know, causing trouble in CHOP? You know, what do we know about who was leading the organized efforts in CHOP? Did the message, obviously you said, you know, the message may have been lost, But what were we seeing inside CHOP? Were we seeing just people coming in from out of town, or people coming in to start trouble? Was there gang activity? There are all kinds of things being said right now. What do you know about that?
Well, I can't describe and speak for CHOP within itself because I wasn't in the inside of CHOP. I just only know what I know just by being down there the few times that I was down there and the people reporting to me, and then seeing the actions of some of the people that did not recognize some of the work that has been going on here in Seattle and Washington State. But as far as understanding what was going on in the inside mechanisms of the workings of CHOP, I have no idea, absolutely. Yeah. I don't want to sit here and feel like I'm speaking for CHOP. I'm sure they'll be able to have a lot of things to say after the day. But, I wasn't speaking for CHOP, so I couldn't answer those questions for you.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. I also am just wondering, how does the community move forward? How do we move forward if people have been working and doing the work here in Seattle? How does everyone come together and move forward? If the conversation is still about dismantling police, how does that move forward, especially now that protesters have said we won't leave until our demands are met? Well, now they've gone. So what do you think how do you think the conversation needs to move forward?
Well, I am in agreement with reallocation of funds. I mean, I think that's a consistency throughout the country. I don't think that everyone was a part or even supporting the vision of CHOP. There were some, but there's a lot of people in our city. Seattleites are extremely resilient. We'll move on and continue to do great work here in Seattle and Washington State. But, there's a lot of work already happening here. We didn't just start with CHOP. Our work has been an ongoing process. There's many community organizations that are doing excellent work in all communities here. And so we will continue doing that work and continuing trying to partner together in that work that's already been going on here in Seattle, Washington. As I said, Seattleites are extremely resilient. We will gather ourselves. We will reflect on what has happened here, on how we could support things like this, and what we will not support ever again. So we're not going to support violence. That's what I know, and I think that is something that could be agreed upon on every community here in Seattle and throughout this state. But we want to support free speech of these youngsters and the fresh ideas that they have. I thought they were extraordinarily brilliant in some of that. So I just don't want to speak all negativity about some of the things that have transpired with CHOP. Mm-hmm. It's just that when violence is mixed with anything that you do, it becomes a different situation.
Yeah, no, that is definitely
and
for
Andre,
sure.
I don't want this to get lost in the message this morning, but certainly, you've been working and putting in the work because your brother lost his life. How are you continuing to honor his life today?
The motto of my organization at this time is called "Do the Work." So we will continue to doing the work. By honoring my brother and the other 14 families that we represent that have lost someone due to police violence, we will do the work. I'm a part of the governor's task force, so I will continue to try to help in that process. Build upon 940. We're at the end of the implementation process of 940, and people will begin to see and realize what 940 really is able to do. And I'm excited to see that transpire.
Okay.
Well, we appreciate your work, and now that you're on the task force, we will be asking you how that's going and checking in with you as well.
Absolutely. I appreciate you this morning. Thank you.
All right. That's Andre Taylor. He is one of the lead organizers of Not This Time and a very outspoken organizer of some of the early protests. If you are just waking up again on this July 1st morning, you're seeing an operation from Seattle Police unfold here live on King 5 Mornings. Police in large numbers pushing into the so-called CHOP, clearing out anyone and everyone under an emergency order from the mayor signed overnight. Police Chief Carmen Best saying enough is enough, and today's the day. This now since June 8th, the first time Seattle Police have now moved back into the East Precinct.
don't see that tweet.
Let's continue to talk to some of our crews on the ground this morning. I believe this is Michael Crow's shot here. We are on the back side of Cal Anderson Park. He's talking to some protesters there. We'll get to him in just a moment. But Michelle, it appears as we watch this now, about an hour and 49 minutes after police originally moved in, 13 arrests have been made, protesters meeting police with resistance, but that really didn't last very long. We saw a couple of sort of tense moments, but now everything according to witnesses there on scene too seems peaceful, quiet, and police regaining control.
Yeah, there are still little dust-ups, and there's certainly activity, Jake. And the one thing I do think is interesting and slightly remarkable in all of this, Seattle police and the city obviously had a plan on how they were going to execute this morning. And that is one way we are able to keep track of what's happening, is because there's actually someone or a few people dedicated to updating the Seattle Police's Twitter page. We're getting kind of a play-by-play of what is happening from the perspective of the police department. And I just wanted to share a couple of things that are happening just within the last few minutes. The Seattle Police Department said that officers are now currently investigating several vehicles that are circling the area of today's operation. So they're circling maybe Cal Anderson Park or the Chop Zone. Police have observed several individuals in those vehicles with firearms as well. Those vehicles also appear to be operating without visible license plates. Those are the exact words from the police department. So again, we're seeing people driving around this operation zone without license plates and potentially armed, and police are trying to investigate the situation there. Now, on the flip side of that, they have been trying to clear Cal Anderson Park this morning. They've been checking tents and checking the restrooms, and now this other situation has appeared, and just within the last 10 or 12 minutes or so, police are now working with Seattle Fire because a woman apparently went into labor on the east side of Cal Anderson Park. So this is a whole other issue. As they're clearing the park, now they're trying to bring in emergency crews because a woman is going to have a baby today. So that's a very, very I don't know. That's just a very emotional, intense situation in itself. So I can't even imagine what that's going on, what that's like right now. Yeah, we wish, of course, wish mom and baby well. As medics there on scene obviously know what they are doing. They're the best of the best. We're also awaiting word from Seattle Police. They are giving us minute-to-minute updates via Twitter right now. Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best is there on the scene this morning. Quick programming note for you, we will be staying on the hour, on the air here on King 5 through the top of the hour, and then after that, make sure to turn over to King 5 Mornings on Kong as we continue this coverage of another historic day in Seattle as police regain control of this area known as the Capitol Hill Occupied protest, which really began in earnest on June the 8th. It was June 11th that the police chief had said it wasn't her fault that police had abandoned the East Precinct. The mayor said it was orders from her, with fears that the protesters were going to get unruly and light the building on fire. But here we are now for the first time since then, in at least large numbers, police moving back into that East Precinct after this early morning operation. The timeline on your screen right here. June the 20th, by the way, was a dark, dark day in the CHOP history. It was the first deadly shooting, one of 4 total shootings, in fact. There were 2 deadly shootings, a 16-year-old boy and a 19-year-old both losing their lives in that violence. June the 26th, we saw city crews with order from the mayor to move in, start removing barriers that protesters put there to block those streets at 11th and 12th and Pine. It was unsuccessful. Those crews met with resistance from protesters. They bailed out. Yesterday, we watched those barriers get removed in large numbers by those same city crews. So piece by piece, the CHOP has been dismantled, and it has been, in a sense, totally dismantled
as of right now this morning. But it is scary here as we play some video from earlier this morning at some of those tense moments. Michelle, scary to hear in a sense that police are investigating several of these vehicles circling the area because, as Andre just mentioned, people that have been protesting CHOP don't really live there. Majority of them are from out of town. So you're hoping that although it looks like the mission has been successful so far, that police can still hold the area and there is no additional violence. You never hope for that.
Right, absolutely. You know, I do think it was interesting to hear from Andre. Of course, if you remember, his brother was killed by police in 2016, and he's really been trying to do the work for the Black community and for just racial injustice for these last few years. And he was saying that he had heard that people were coming in from Chicago and from other cities across the country to be in CHOP. And so when they were talking about how do we move forward with peaceful protests and how do we move forward with solving these community issues, a lot of people didn't have the answers. They didn't know that there were even certain problems because they were not from Seattle. So I think that is interesting. And Andre said that he is now part of the governor's task force, which is asking community members and people who have been touched by police brutality and violence to come forward with these issues of policing and racial injustice. So, you know, we heard Andre mentioned I-940. This is the structure and investigative protocol per se to offer independent investigations into police when we see issues of brutality. So I think that, you know, the message here is how do you move forward? It is certainly not with people in violent situations or threatening police with you know, guns, being armed, circling Cal Anderson Park in the CHOP zone right now. I think that is exactly what Andre was saying, that hurts the message. That's only what people are going to remember, that 2 people died during these last 3 weeks. And not only just 2 people, but 2 teenagers, a 19-year-old and a 16-year-old. And that is another thing that Andre said. He said that at some point, the message should have pivoted. Instead of just honoring the lives of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, they should have been looking at those 2 lives that were lost within CHOP in the last 3 weeks, those 2 young lives. So it is an interesting morning because it's a fluid situation, and we're seeing, you know, as police are clearing out these scenes and then having to go back and potentially arrest people, and now this threat of police investigating people driving around with armed weapons. It's just it's a very interesting situation, and I think Andre has been very clear that dilutes the message. Yeah, no doubt. I think everybody, far and wide, you don't have to live in Seattle, you don't have to live on Capitol Hill to have an opinion about what's going on. As we were saying, I mean, this affects just about everybody. Everyone I talk to from, you know, obviously they know I work with the news, but everyone is talking, conversation always about CHOP, what's happening in Seattle. You don't have to be in Seattle. If you could be in Whatcom County, you could be in Thurston, Kitsap County, you name it, everyone knows the deal. And by and large, you hear the message that, yes, Black lives matter. Of course, this movement should continue in some way. But is closing city streets and seizing a police station the way to do it? That's been that sort of testy conversation that's always come up. And this morning in a statement, Chief Carmen Best saying she too wants the movement to continue in a meaningful way. But enough is enough. I mean, as they documented, Michelle, 65 separate incidents within the CHOP over the past few weeks, whether it be robberies, larceny, violence, I mean, you name it. No one has been charged in the most recent killing, but certainly murder could be a charge that arrives out of all of this. So as Andre said, not the direction that original organizers wanted this to go, but in earnest this morning, the CHOP has been fully dismantled. And going on with what you were saying, Jake, you know, it was interesting because when the police vacated that East Precinct, Carmen Best kind of did this, you know, surprise YouTube release and saying, okay, I did not want that to happen. That was not my decision. So you could see the two, you could see Mayor Jenny Durkin and Chief Carmen Best at odds on how to handle that situation. And Chief Carmen Best said that was not my decision. But today there is a a teamwork, a collective effort to clear out the CHOP today and to take back the East Precinct. And again, we've been saying it this morning, but it has certainly been just in observation, it appears to be a somewhat thought out plan, because the city and because the police shared this joint proclamation, this 48-hour emergency, and also just the data that we've received on the assaults and the incidents that have taken place over the last 3 weeks, the video that they compiled of violence happening in CHOP, and then coming out with someone to tweet play-by-plays of what's happening in the CHOP zone right now. Those all take resources and a plan of action so that the public has this transparency to understand what is happening this morning.
Yeah. If you are now just joining us here on King 5 Mornings, we're so glad you're waking up with us here on your July 1st Wednesday. A quick recap, we are staying on the air through the top of the hour for continuing coverage here as we watched, beginning at about 4:45 local time, Seattle police fortifying around the SPD East Precinct and the so-called CHOP, moving in, taking back the East Precinct, the mayor signing an executive public safety order overnight to vacate anyone and everyone out of the so-called CHOP in Cal Anderson Park. Police in riot gear have been confronting protesters who have been refusing to leave the area. So far, police have made at least 13 arrests and moving in closer and closer with just about every minute. At the current moment, things appear to be quiet and peaceful. Police are investigating suspicious vehicles that seem to be circling the area. They're noticing the drivers that appear to be armed and in tactical gear themselves. And to further complicate the matters, as protesters are moved to the north end of Cal Anderson Park, medics have just been called. A woman is going into labor. Let's get into Michael Crow down in the Cal Anderson Park area, one of several crews on the ground. Michael, what are you seeing where you're at?
Hey, we've made it to the far side from where we started this morning of CHOP. So this is Denny and 11th, right? The back side of Cal Anderson Park. Protesters have arrived here. They've kind of circled around here and they're chanting every day. Right now you can hear, but there's this long line of folks in tactical gear. I just heard a pop. I don't know what that was. All the cops are looking that way too. 2 pops, 3. We're listening here.
That's the entertainers.
So I don't know what those are. We just heard 4, I think, pops. There are officers looking that way, like they look just as confused as we are as they kind of look that way, but I'm not seeing, a lot of hustle in that direction. So we're going to continue on. We are on that backside, though. A lot of tents back here. This was kind of the encampment area, right? They have cleared folks out. We were watching kind of along those little alleys as we came this way where they were keeping people out that wanted to go back in and get their stuff. Take a look here. So this is all the cops, of course, holding this line, keeping people out. You've got the SWAT tactical vehicle there. With folks with firearms there standing in kind of the back, this SPD line holding. I think I'm a little turned around in terms of where that happened, but I think we are not far from where that woman went into labor, from what I heard you guys say. So we are just kind of checking out the backside here of Cal Anderson, where I would say the largest group of protesters I've seen in about an hour is, standing here, kind of engaged with cops. It's been interesting this morning, if you're just joining us after that early morning kind of tactical operation, right, that we saw where police just swarmed this area. We saw a lot of kind of activity. We were waiting to see if it would happen. A lot of cars kind of driving around, unmarked cars, bopping in and out from police, just checking out what was here. And then all of a sudden, all at once, they move in, and we saw hundreds of officers really in a concerted effort move through and take back the CHOP. So now it has kind of calmed down and they're in a holding pattern, keeping people out. They were pushing people down 12th and not allowing them back in, but that is what we're doing right now. And certainly we've seen as people kind of have woken up. I mean, what time is it? 7 o'clock now. We have certainly seen that people kind of are coming out of their homes, wondering what's going on, checking out the scene, and honestly waking to see that the protesters occupying this part of Capitol Hill have been replaced by police, not allowing anyone in for several blocks.
And Michael, just an update for you as well. Police just confirming that it appears fireworks are being set off there near the Pine and Broadway area.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
The flashbangs are a little louder, but I think it just notes like there is that level of confusion when any loud noise happens like that in this area, right? I mean, I saw even these cops in their tactical gear, right? Their heads kind of snap around and look at what's happening on the other side of the field there.
Right, and police know a gunshot when they hear one. Michelle, go ahead.
Well, no, I was going to say the same update, that it appears that those were fireworks if you're near Pine and Broadway, so that is at least some settling information. Michael, I'm just wondering, you know, it's such a busy scene. Are you safe? Have you felt safe this morning?
Yeah, we have. I mean, I'll tell you, right, the first thing we walked in this morning, we had a protester getting right in our face, you know, trying to kind of cause some trouble and really getting too close and kind of physical. That was during our first hit, but we've been just fine. I haven't seen, you know, nothing like what we saw, you know, what was it, the 31st, you know.
All right. Michael Crow.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Michael Crow, thank you so much. Stay safe down there, keeping the update. We're going to get back to Kira Alfallen, where it appears that Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best is now going to speak before cameras, giving us no doubt an update on what we've been seeing this morning as she prepares there, just framing it up yet again for you this morning. The mayor overnight ordering anyone and everyone to clear the CHOP, clear Cal Anderson Park, and Chief Best ordering her SWAT officers and others to move in and reclaim the East Precinct, which is that building behind her with the big boarded up windows. That is the Seattle Police East Precinct. Looking forward to hearing from the chief here in just a moment. Apparently waiting for a little more media to get there. Michelle, we are seeing the chief, and as we see another arrest on your screen here, confirmed this morning, Seattle Police have made 13 arrests. This may make 14. Relatively peaceful arrest. Michelle, though, well, here comes the police chief. Let's listen in.
Our department is part of a coordinated city effort to address life safety, public health, and public property damage on Capitol Hill, around Cal Anderson Park, and the Seattle Police Department East Precinct. Under an executive order from Mayor Durkin, the Seattle Police Department was among the first of the city agencies to enter this area today. Our job was to vacate the area and issue dispersal orders. This order and our police response comes after weeks of violence in and around the Capitol Hill occupied protest zone, including multiple shootings resulting in many injuries and 2 deaths. Death of 2 teenagers. At this point, we've had at least 13 arrests. I don't have the specifics on all of the arrests. My plan is to update all of you with more information as it becomes available later today. I want to reiterate what I have said. I support peaceful demonstrations. Black Lives Matter. And I too want to help propel this movement forward toward meaningful exchange in our community and meaningful change in our community. But enough is enough. Our job is to protect and to serve the community. Our job is to support peaceful demonstrations. But what has happened here on these streets over the last few weeks that is lawless and it's brutal. And bottom line, it is simply unacceptable. I will continue to work with our Community Police Commission, our Office of Police Accountability, and our Office of Inspector General, and all of our community partners and city leaders to encourage peace and move forward with how to re-envision public safety in our city. I'll take a few questions. Again, this is early, it's very fluid, but I'll give you what information I can at this time, and we'll give you further updates as the time progresses.
Chief Best, is this going to be back to normal tomorrow, regular Capitol Hill, or is it still going to be part of the job?
Well, right now, we've cleared out a number of demonstrators. We're going to have other city organizations and city interests come in. We'll clean up the area, we'll clean up our precinct, and we'll start operations as soon as we reasonably can.
In those arrests, Chief, did you confiscate any weapons, any guns?
No, I don't have that information at this point. I know people were arrested. Obviously, there's still some cleanup. There's still some things that will be happening with the tents. So we'll be able to answer that better later in the day.
Ma'am, have you physically moved in the building?
No, we're not in the building at this point. We've done a search of the building to make sure that there weren't any obstacles or any other concerns in the building. So we have cleaned the building out in that regard, but we're certainly not moving in as yet.
Chief, you brought additional support with you. Can you tell us about all of the people or the agencies that accompanied you this morning?
Yeah, that's a great question. We really want to thank the Bellevue Police Department, Chief Milet, for sending his resources to assist us, as well as our local FBI that was out here as well. Otherwise, the personnel were from the Seattle Police Department.
Chief, what do you do to keep them from coming back to the East Precinct or even going to the West Precinct and surrounding that area?
Well, in terms of the East Precinct, the mayor's order makes it clear that this area is off limits at this time, and so no one should be in the area, and we'll be enforcing that fully. We have no other threats to any other facility at this time, but clearly, we'll be having additional staffing in all of our areas. I'll take one more question.
Was the navigation team out at Cal Anderson Park as it was clear this morning? Do you know?
Yeah, many of the members of our navigation team participated in this organizational effort.
Can I ask just one more question? You mentioned working with the community. Have you seen their latest list of demands, some of those things? Do you have any comment on any of those?
Well, I think there's going to be continuing dialogue and negotiations as we envision how we do public safety. So I look forward to having those discussions along with other city members, and we'll see where it turns out. Thank you so much. We'll be back later. Thanks.
All right, Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best giving us an update there on what is happening on the ground. She's confirming much of what we've already reported to you. Some 13 arrests have been made this morning. She says, in her words, Black Lives Matter. I, too, want to support meaningful change, she says, but enough is enough. She is obviously in full support of this effort to clear the CHOP this morning. She did note that police have physically re-entered the East Precinct. Would be for the first time, by and large, since June 8th. But they have not officially reestablished, if you will, their position. They have just cleared the building to make sure it was safe. She thanked other local agencies for providing their support. That includes the FBI. One thing that was really interesting the chief just said, Michelle, was about this idea of reimagining what local police will look like moving forward. The big question is, the message of CHOP should continue, just not the physical presence of blocking several city streets in a major metropolitan city. Mm-hmm. So reimagining police, it's going to be an interesting discussion to see what comes out of this.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, Jake, too, because that is also what we heard from Andre Taylor, who just spoke a few minutes ago with us, saying that CHOP was an ideal, right, instead of a location. And as we are seeing cities across the country look at this idea of what it looks like to potentially dismantle police or reallocate funding, I think those will be the big conversations moving forward. We know that just a few days ago, the Minneapolis City Council, for example, said that they will defund police. They will bring that effort to the voters in the fall, and they will look at how to reallocate funds. Also, big news out of New York this morning. So, what will it look like in Seattle? Mayor Jenny Durkin said, okay, we could take 5% and reallocate that of the police budget, but protesters have said that's not enough. So we have seen this back and forth. What does it look like to reimagine the police department? What does it look like if we reallocated funds into the community rather than the police department? I think it's an interesting discussion as we see it kind of unfold across the country, and then also knowing that a lot of the resources, the funding that goes to the police department actually goes for payroll. So, if you defund the police department, are you taking officers off the street? Those are all questions that we'll be looking at in the coming, days and weeks and months, and I'm sure much longer than that.
And you're looking live here at your screen. This is an actual live stream provided to us courtesy of Converge Media. It is an independent outlet online of some local journalists there. And just on your point again, Michelle, too, the mayor did recently announce some cuts to Seattle police, and it's going to be part of, for lack of a better word, a tsunami of cuts that's about to hit every city in the country because of coronavirus and because of all the lack of business taxes that have been collected. So defunding the police may happen in small chunks, at least, by design or by default. So this police
kind
officer,
of by natural attrition.
right?
Case,
yeah, exactly. Interested to hear as well how, in case you're just joining us, to further sort of complicate some efforts there near Cal Anderson Park, medics have just been called. A woman is going into labor this morning as police clear out the chop. So all of our best to mom and baby there, but waiting to get an update on that.
Well, we do have an update on that, Jake. We do have an update on that. So I can tell you, the Seattle Fire Department actually tweeted that they evaluated the woman. She did not require any medical treatment or transportation to the hospital. So hopefully it was just a false alarm. And hopefully mom and baby are doing okay.
Yeah,
but,
or the baby's born.
That was the latest. Right, we don't know that. Yeah,
thinking of
let's hope not. Oh my goodness.
Oh, geez, I just hope the best for that mom. It's got to be terrifying. A quick recap. Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best just giving us an update this morning as police move into the building. I don't know if we have the timeline ready to go in their court, but it's been an interesting ride. For the so-called Capitol Hill occupied protest zone, actually just outside of our Seattle, out of our King 5 studios. I'm starting to see more police presence as well. Looks like they're moving in to try to maybe clear out some of the tents and so forth. But here is that timeline we talked about. It was June the 8th when we saw all of those protests downtown in protests in the death of George Floyd. And CHOP was essentially created at that time. It was called CHAZ at the time, if you remember. But it was June the 11th that we heard from Police Chief Carmen Best then, who said it wasn't her idea to abandon the East Precinct. It was the mayor's call, overriding the chief, saying to evacuate the precinct for fear that protesters were going to burn it down. June the 20th, it was the first of two deadly shootings in the so-called CHOP zone, a 19-year-old losing his life at that time. It was later that month, last week, when we saw, or I should say this week, when a 16-year-old boy lost his life in a shooting. June 26th, last week, the first attempt to remove the barriers, unsuccessful. Protesters met city crews. And June the 30th, here we are, yesterday, barriers removed. This is interesting. Can we listen into this Converge Media moment here, guys? No audio? Okay, well, we've got Police Chief Carmen Best talking with, I believe it's probably Omari on the back of on the other side of the camera here. Boy, I wish we could listen into this, but we'll work on that audio, Michelle. But this is a live stream here on your screen of now Police Chief Carmen Best talking to these independent journalists. Yeah,
well, let's go ahead and listen into Michael Crow. He has been talking with protesters who have been on the move since 5 o'clock this morning. And also, Michael had reported that services will be available for people to get their stuff. But no specifics. That was something that Michael just shared with us online. But Michael, what can you see and what can you hear right now?
Yeah, just a note on that. I mean, we were kind of over at the, I think it was the west edge of Cal Anderson, and people were mad. They wanted to go in and get their stuff, and so one of the cops said, you know, there will be services available to get your belongings, but we don't have any specifics on that. I am staying here with Kelly Forsyth, lives in the area here. He's been watching the CHOP continue, and we were just talking about kind of his thoughts as a resident in the area over the last couple weeks. You were just telling me about kind of, you know, the incidents being kind of a concern for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry that it has to end this way, but we've had too many people injured, property damage, and children killed, and really the whole thing has been about violence. So I don't understand why it's gone on as long as it has.
And you were talking about how you believe in the movement and the idea of people having, you know, equity and civil rights and things like that. But you were also talking about your issues with the way this is kind of unfolded.
Well, absolutely believe in the movement, and it's the kind of thing that I have protested for and against my whole life. Yeah. That's kind of the thing, that this is a neighborhood of people who have supported protests like this for many, many years. But the way it is broken down hasn't been anything positive for anyone here.
Yeah. You strike me, I'm just watching you stand here, you look kind of transfixed by the whole scene. Like, what's going on in your head, you know?
I was hoping that it wouldn't have to end this way and that people would walk out on their own. But there's been a lot of people, it seems and appears, that have been emboldened by the lack of police coming to help anyone. So they feel like they don't have to go anywhere.
Well, we have seen that they have cleared it out. It has happened this morning. We saw.
Yeah.
It is, the police are certainly have control of several blocks here. So Kelly, thank you very much. We appreciate it. I might come back and chat with you in a minute, but we're gonna head down this way. Thank you for your time. Okay. We're gonna take a look here so I can show you guys the scene here. Walk with me. We are on the this is the north side of Cal Anderson Park. We're on 11th right now at Denny, and we're just going to walk up here. This is the protest group that we kind of saw on the far side. It looks like, you know, some of those same folks have made it over here, so we're kind of looking at that right now. You can see right here, Cal Anderson Park to the left, the right, a long line of police holding that line, keeping people out of the park. Some protesters here engaging, videotaping, yelling at the police. That's what we've kind of been seeing on and off here over maybe the last half hour or so at this area, but certainly peaceful would be the word I would use. You know, we haven't seen any altercations really, but you know, there's passion and there's emotion here. So this group, maybe 24, maybe 30 people, does not appear to intend to leave in the near future. I will say we saw this morning, again, if you're just joining us, when police just a block away here were pushing in mass, you know, several hundred officers moving their way through the CHOP to clear it out, pushing people south down 12th. So that is what we saw, and they appear to have reclaimed the area. So that's what we're looking at right now here.
All right, Michael Crow, thank you so much for your reporting throughout the morning. He's been up since 5 o'clock this morning. You know, earlier we saw Michael, he was part of this crowd as well, when police moved into the CHOP and started pushing people back down 12th with their bicycles. We also know that police used some pepper spray earlier this morning. We've heard bangs throughout the morning, but we are not able to identify if those were flashbangs. We know that fireworks were used by some protesters as well. But this all started, again, probably around 5 o'clock this morning. It's hard for me to keep track at this point because we have been on the air with this coverage nonstop for a couple of hours now. But it did seem like it took maybe an hour or less for police to clear out this zone, and police have been very transparent in why they used heightened gear and why they were in protective gear. They said that they were using this because that there were some members in the CHOP zone who have been armed and essentially dangerous, and so they felt that they had to execute this higher presence in some way. So we've just been watching all of this unfold, and now we know that police have been trying to clear out Cal Anderson Park this morning, trying to still keep protesters on the move and to disperse. They've been giving these disperse warnings to folks, but there have been some people out there, Jake, who have said, we will hold the line, we will stay there. But it has certainly been an interesting and kind of a challenging morning as police are trying to do this and clear out the area. We've heard from people who saying, okay, some of these people are not even from Seattle. And then people are saying, okay, we still have this movement that we care about deeply and need to move forward. So very interesting morning. We've been looking at some of the social media that's coming down at 7:22 this morning, and if you're in the CHOP zone, it is basically clear and empty. Now, will it go back to normal tomorrow? Will it be business as usual? That's something that one of the reporters asked Chief Carmen Best. Still yet to be seen, but again, it looks like the CHOP zone is clear this morning.
Yeah, and as Chief Best indicated, her officers have moved physically into the East Precinct to clear it out. Looks like everything in there is safe. No one snuck inside, but they have not officially reestablished the police force there. That's likely to come in the next few days. Our Michael Crow also earlier this morning spoke to a protester who was visibly upset about what was happening. Let's listen to that exchange real quick.
We're being shut down right now as peaceful protesters because of a pre-existing gang problem that already existed in Cal Anderson Park, that the Seattle Police Department is all accountable for.
And we've heard from several demonstrators like that woman there who are upset, obviously, at what they are seeing. But as the police chief said, enough is enough. Another interesting point, in the last week here or so, other protesters did start showing up at the Seattle West precinct. Michelle, if you remember, it's only about a mile and a half or so from the East Precinct. Protesters made their way down there. No word that there's been any sort of shift in focus down there this morning to the West Precinct. The chief says everything is secure as of right now.
Right, but she did say that the mayor's order has been very clear about what's happening at the East Precinct. So if anyone is in that area, they will be arrested. This is all a part of that 48-hour emergency proclamation. But I think the one thing that has been clear, the messaging that we've heard both from the mayor and also from the chief, is that Black lives do matter. There will be continuing conversations on what reallocating funds could potentially look like and how this movement moves forward. A lot of people who have talked to us this morning, for instance, Andre Taylor, he said CHOP is better as an ideal, not necessarily as a location. And we have seen, just because of the lawlessness and the violence that has taken place, according to Seattle police and the city, that this was a move that was almost inevitable, say some people who were kind of inside or in that movement, saying that the message had been lost several days, if not weeks ago.
Right. And the chief, Michelle, as we just heard, making it clear, this move this morning is not about the Black Lives Matter movement, shutting that down. It's not about squashing the message. It's about reopening city streets and bringing law and order back to this lawless society, for lack of a better word, where there have been so many crimes, 65 reported crimes at least, 2 deaths, 4 shootings. It just goes on and on. Let's hear from Carmen Best in some tape we're turning around just now. Listen in.
Well, in terms of the East Precinct, the mayor's order makes it clear that this area is off limits at this time, and so no one should be in the area, and we'll be enforcing that fully. We have no other threats to any other facility at this time, but clearly, we'll be having additional staffing in all of our areas.
The chief then going on to say, no word on any weapons that were seized. Other local agencies, including the FBI, helped. And she went on to say, Michelle, about this idea of reimagining the police department. I just keep thinking, what are those discussions like between Chief Best and Mayor Durkan? There has been some tension there. The chief coming out and quote unquote leaking a video on YouTube about how she was not the one who made the call to abandon the East Precinct. She's blamed the mayor for doing it. The mayor said it was her. So I got to wonder what those conversations are like right now. It's something a chief and a mayor have likely never talked about in the history of our city.
I know. I agree. It would be interesting to be behind closed doors. And the thing, I think, at least, we know that they were at odds with that. But today they have really come out with a united front on how to move forward, how to clear out CHOP, and how to execute this plan over the next 48 hours during this emergency proclamation. And, I think that this whole thing happened within, less than an hour, Jake, perhaps? I mean, we saw CHOP get cleared fairly quickly, I would say.
Right.
In fact, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I was just going to say, in fact, we've seen some pictures now of what CHOP looks like within the last maybe 10, 15 minutes or so. Our colleague, Joseph Suttner, who is a producer at New Day, just tweeted out a new picture, and he says this is what's left of the CHOP as of 7:18, so 8 minutes ago. You can see there are a lot of canopies and tents, honey buckets, even a car, a Jeep, a lot of, I don't know what that is, but there's just still a lot of artwork and belongings of people. And Michael Crow said that there is going to be some services in place to help people receive their belongings, but no specific plans at this time. And then we have another tweet. Jake, can you talk about this one?
Yep, no, I certainly can. I mean, what you're seeing on your screen now, another tweet from a gentleman on social media pointing out that the police clearing out the CHOP after the mayor's declaration. It's the first time I've seen any additional sort of construction work crews downtown. I'm not sure if this picture was taken yesterday or not, but that is indicative of what's been happening down there in the last 24 hours. Crews going in there. It took them two tries to move in and try to clear things out, but the effort basically started yesterday. Then this morning at about 4:45, we saw police fortifying in that area, ready for anything. And a huge number of police officers, SWAT officers, FBI agents, largely outnumbering protesters in the early hours to move in, successfully taking back the East Precinct and starting to clear things out. Seattle, and here's another live stream from Converge Media, an online independent group of journalists. What a mess. What a mess. I mean, Seattle is familiar with scenes like this. The homeless crisis has been just devastating for parts of the downtown area, devastating for the homeless and for the people who have to put up with the camps that become so unhealthy and for lack of a better word, just unlivable. And so this clearing of camps, or as the homeless would call them, sweeping of camps, is not a new sort of tactic that the city has had to deploy. It's essentially what they're doing, Michelle. They're clearing out the CHOP, but a large portion of the CHOP became a homeless camp. I mean, you just have to sort of face the facts on that.
Well, absolutely, Jake. And if you think about what we've heard from some of the people who were familiar with CHOP and some of the messaging out, a lot of people felt like they were disorganized and that different groups were coming in, people from different cities as well. So you can understand why some people are frustrated who are trying to perhaps move the conversation forward in terms of racial inequity and injustice, and then distractions that were happening inside CHOP as well.
Yeah. If you're just now waking up and joining us, we appreciate you waking up on a July 1st morning with us. It is the bottom of the hour, 7:30 on your Wednesday, and it is about 2.5 hours after we first started to see Seattle police officers in large numbers move into the so-called CHOP zone of Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood and take back the East Precinct. They were met by resistance, as you see here on your screen earlier, by protesters waking up, obviously fighting back, disagreeing with the tactics police were deploying to clear the area. Overnight, Mayor Jenny Durkin issuing an emergency order, a public safety order, to clear the CHOP zone, clear the Capitol Hill area around Cal Anderson Park for the next 45 hours. These police officers in riot gear wasted no time moving in, pushing those protesters. At least 13 arrests have been made that we know of. No weapons seized, according to the chief, that she knew of quite yet. Police have moved into that East Precinct to clear the building. It has been deemed safe. They have not reestablished the police force there, but the East Precinct, for lack of a better term, has been reclaimed. Lots of crews on the ground for King 5 this morning, all busy piecing it all together, Michelle. But another historic day as we watch it all unfold now peacefully here at 7:31.
Yeah, and we do have an update for you, Jake, because you were mentioning people who might be homeless in that area. It appears that the Human Services Department of Seattle is now on scene at CHOP, and they are continuing to offer services and also store personal possessions as well that are found in the area today. So they're going to have more information on their blog. So again, this continues to show the united effort between the city and police as they are trying to not only clear out the CHOP area, but also to continue to offer services for those who may be living unsheltered at the time. And I was taking a look at the blog that they had just posted. They said that, from June 23rd through yesterday, the Human Interest Department had made a total of 124 engagements. Some of those were duplicated, but they had made contact 124 times with people who are unhoused, and they had been able to refer more than a dozen people to shelters. Also, they've been able to connect people to service providers as well, and that's just a kind of a preliminary snapshot of what is happening and some of the data, of course, that's available right now. But there is this whole blog post by HSD, which I think, again, shows this concerted effort to not only just clear this area out, but also to provide services and to make sure that everyone has the same message going forward from the city today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and, I'm spending a little bit of time down there at the CHOP along with my colleagues. It became its own sustainable city in a way. I mean, there were volunteers that were showing up. There were furloughed chefs showing up with food, local businesses supplying water. One of the volunteers said, all we did was got on Facebook and we said, hey, can anyone bring down a basketball hoop? Ha, ha, ha. a basketball hoop showed up within the hour, and they were playing basketball. I mean, there was so much support for Chaz early on that it was able to gain that momentum. But at some point, and who knows what that moment was, as Andre indicated, maybe it was the first shooting, maybe it was the first sign of violence, but the message took a turn, and the CHOP took a turn. And we've been seeing fewer and fewer people within the CHOP in recent days. And when city crews started removing barriers yesterday, it was very clear that the end was near, because protesters were not sort of resisting as much as we'd seen early on. So, as the chief said, enough is enough. Black lives do matter, she says. She wants to see meaningful change. But at some point, you've got to take back the city. And in this case, it has been, I'll count the days in a moment, but since June 8th, that the CHOP was created. That is quite a lot of time for things to take a turn.
Yeah, and that's what we've seen, these last 3 weeks. We've also seen an interesting rise in people who claim to be citizen journalists and live streams and just people sharing a ton on the internet, on social media platforms. So let's go to Amity Idrisi, who's been tracking what has been happening on social this morning. Good morning, Amity.
Good morning to you, Michelle. I know you and I both have been watching closely the social media streams and seeing a lot of what we've seen from our own photographers, just like you said. I want to show you some video right now from someone who tweeted this morning as the police were slowly pushing back the protesters out of that area known as CHOP. This first video shows more of an active presence, more of a quick clear out than we initially saw from officers as they first got started. You can see here they've got their bicycles up, the batons up, and everyone's moving back pretty smoothly, pretty easily. And you can actually even see one of our cameras right there, one of our photojournalists, Mark Anderson, shoulder to shoulder. And then, of course, you see the skirmish here. Now, this is actually video that was taken by our very own Michael Crow, and I believe reposted by this person. So as we went through the morning, we saw a lot of the same thing. I want to show you this next video from someone called Dustin Akers, and he's basically shooting outside the window of his apartment and says, just like that, CHOP is closed. And you can see police kind of pushing those barricades out of the way. This is a really interesting shot because you can see the size of the police force pushing the protesters back. What I think is also interesting in this video is that there are not a whole lot of protesters there holding the line. When we're on the ground, it's hard to see who is around us. But from this shot, from this vantage point, you can see, and also you can see someone literally carrying their tent out of the area without being able to collapse it. So again, this is a shot from outside someone's window. Let me take you to a photo from a gentleman that we have been in close contact with throughout this. He is really the citizen journalist a lot of people have been turning to. His live stream has been incredibly popular. He has been invited to events that even the media have not been allowed to, namely an event with Mayor Durkin. She did not invite local media to attend this negotiation between protesters and police, but yet she did invite Omari to go there, and he's been tweeting these pictures. I'm not sure if I can take you to a few more. Do we have time for a few more?
Fire away.
Okay, she's pulling up. All right, here we go. So you see, this is the shot from Omari this morning, who he was just basically showing the scene and standing back as police got ready. This is very early in the morning. This is just as police were about to start moving. From this point on, police started to move about 5 feet or so, slowly moving protesters back. This is right before they secured the East Precinct again. All right, if there's another photo we can show here of SPD. This woman tweeted that SPD was tearing down some of the tents that blocked their garage at the entrance. You can't really see a whole lot in this photo. And then if we can keep going next, SPD, they have been very, very active on social media. They have been obviously prepared to deal with this just as they started to retake the East Precinct, just as they started their movement this morning. They actually tweeted out a video that was edited with all the different acts of violence that have happened in the area since June 8th. So obviously they're reasoning for that was to show people why this was such an important thing to do at this time. And they also tweeted that basically, due to the violence and their concerns about armed and dangerous suspects in the CHOP, that they were wearing a higher level of protective gear, and that's what you saw. So, Jake, I know you were mentioning earlier a tweet that we just showed about the police clearing out the barricade zones, clearing up CHOP. From everything it looks to me, Jake, it looks like that photo was just taken recently. But of course, you know, I'm going to keep looking for more to show us here because, as Michelle said, you know, our eyes and ears are on the ground. It's not just us, but it's everyone out there as well. Back to you.
Yeah, no, thanks. Good work there, Amity. Appreciate it. And you are now looking live on your screen here at what is left of the so-called Capitol Hill occupied organized protest there. This is at the 11th and Pine intersection here at 7:39 in the morning local time. That building up on the left corner of your screen is the Seattle Police East Precinct. At the center of all of this, police officers, according to the chief moments ago, have moved back in for the first time since June 8th. They've cleared the building, deemed it safe. Now becomes the effort to clear out the remaining barriers. We can see crews in orange vests doing just that. It's a large presence downtown, worth looking at the traffic impacts. Let's turn it back over to Jordan Wilkerson and get a feel for how things are looking downtown. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, Jake. And we want to kind of give you an aerial view on our graphic maps as well, just in case you don't live in this area and you don't really have any bearings or, you know, landmarks that you can kind of get a gauge on where this is. So let me show you on our traffic flow map. I want to give you that wide shot first. Then I'm going to go ahead and zoom in so you can kind of see, get your bearings of where you are. We're going to zoom in now to the CHOP zone here and see all that purple. Those are the road closures we're seeing down there. So you definitely want to avoid the area, no doubt. But of course, we're definitely going to see, as more people go to work, probably some congestion through these areas as well. I went ahead and labeled Cal Anderson Park so you get a feel for it here. It pretty much extends all the way from Nagel to 11th. And then you can see the East Precinct here as well. So not far, obviously. And then let me go ahead and back out a little bit and show you exactly what roads are blocked off. And then I did relabel Cal Anderson Park and the East Precinct so you have an idea. So from Pine to Broadway, or Pine Street's blocked off from Broadway to 13th, then Pike from Broadway to 13th, Denny Way from 10th to 13th, 13th from Pike to Denny, 11th from Pike to John, 12th from Madison to Denny, and Howell from 11th to 13th. I did go ahead and tweet this out. It's also on my Facebook page and my Instagram because I want to make sure everyone sees this before they head out. But right now, for the most part, traffic isn't looking too bad with the exception of getting into downtown. So do keep that in mind. Maybe give yourself a little extra time and we'll keep you here posted. Like I said, if I'm not on air, I'll be online and on social media so you can check there as well. But yeah, that's a look at it just in case you don't live in that area and you're kind of wondering, okay, let me get a vibe for where this is exactly. So, Jake, back to you.
All right, thank you, Jordan. I'll take it from here. We are getting a live look now from Converge Media. This is a live stream that is being shared on social media platforms, and you can see there are still some mini barricades up in the CHOP zone, and it looks like city crews are working. We see police there as well, but what we don't see, we do not see any more protesters at this time, and that's what we've been seeing now for quite some time. Now, all morning long, we have been able to kind of watch what police are doing, and we thought we saw Carmen Best, the police chief, on scene very early this morning. We did catch her probably less than an hour ago talking to reporters, and this is what she had to say.
Well, in terms of the East Precinct, the mayor's order makes it clear that this area is off limits at this time, and so no one should be in the area, and we'll be enforcing that fully. We have no other threats to any other facility at this time, but clearly, you know, we'll be having additional staffing in all of our areas.
So then again, you heard from Chief Carmen Best probably within the last hour talking to reporters there. She said that there have been several arrests today. We know of at least 13 as tweeted by the police department. She did not know if anyone had confiscated any weapons. However, we have heard reports of people driving around armed with without license plates circling that area. Police were investigating that at some point. We do know that they have made contact now with the East Precinct. They have gone in to do a search of the building. They have cleaned it out, but they have not actually physically moved in at this time. And she also mentioned that she had support. She had mutual aid, if you will. Bellevue Police Department was involved, also the local FBI, and she thanked those agencies for their help. In the meantime, again, the mayor's order makes it clear that the East Precinct and the CHOP zone is now currently off limits. When will it get back to regular? That is still up in the air. I just talked to our photographer, Doug Dillon, and he was telling me that right now, if you're not a resident, you are not allowed to go into that area. But now going forward, where does the dialogue go? That is something that Carmen Best still wants to make effort on. That's very personal for her as well. So she said that she will be back later throughout the day to update us on CHOP and then also to how to move the movement forward. Yeah,
it's going to be really interesting to see those conversations. Maybe it's a committee. Maybe there have been some demands, Michelle, down there for a sort of permanent protest site where police will allow a portion of Cal Anderson Park, for example, to be blocked off for a permanent spot. I mean, nothing has been officially proposed, but I mean, these conversations do continue. One thing is for sure, and I think our Joseph Suttner, our producer of New Day, could tell us, we spoke to him earlier, it sure will be nice to get the neighborhood back. A lot of residents we've seen down there, including the gentleman that Michael talked to, have this enormous empathy for the message and for the protesters and people who were in the CHOP. But enough is enough, according to the chief. It's time to regain control of the city streets. Many ask, why did it take so long? Nonetheless, here we are now, some three and a half weeks after the CHOP was created in earnest. Ask and ye shall receive. Joseph Suttner now joining us back here live on the phone. Joseph, you live right there above the CHOP, and you've been up and at 'em since about 4 a.m. this morning. How have things changed? What are you seeing?
Good morning, Jake. Well, I'm looking at the CHOP right now, or what's left of it, and, there's been SDOT crews, and now there's police in there kind of just looking around, seeing, probably what they need to do next to get it cleaned up. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a chaotic scene in just terms of like what it looks like. I mean, there's fencing all over. There's like an abandoned car. There's, pieces of plywood all over the place. It looks like they're just trying to kind of get started cleaning up.
In terms of number of people that you've seen, how does it compare now, protester-wise?
Let me look over the other way. There's maybe 5 people at the intersection of 12th and Pike, maybe a little more on the other side, but it's very quiet in terms of protesters. I think most of them have moved more towards the Cal Anderson Park area. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, don't you agree, to sort of see how this all unfolds, what it's going to get back to, in the next day or 2 or 3 here. I guess, frankly, are you going to be happy to see this CHOP go away?
Well, who knows what's going to happen. This whole area has been absolutely crazy since the end of May when, the protests were happening downtown. That was the very first day that police started putting up these barricades up here. So, I mean, it's basically been a whole month of just completely not knowing what's going to happen next. And I will say that feeling is still here because, I mean, yes, police have cleared the area out, but there's a lot of, feelings out there still. So I don't think protesters are just going to call it a day and go home. I don't think this is anywhere near being over.
Yeah. One of the responses that Council Member Shama Salwant was giving in response to the shootings and the violence there at the CHOP, she's been a very strong defender of CHOP. She had said, well, there are shootings on Capitol Hill anyway. And I think that raised a lot of eyebrows. And I'm curious, you living there in Capitol Hill, does that ring true? Do you hear about shootings all the time?
I don't hear about them all the time. I mean, there are shootings in Capitol Hill.
Sure.
But, I've never felt unsafe in my apartment before the last 3 weeks. So, I mean, there's like certain clubs that are a little bit rowdy, kind of around this area, but, this was very localized and unlike anything I've seen in the, 5 years I've lived in the Pike Pine corridor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's an otherwise beautiful place to live. I mean, for those of you at home who have never been to Capitol Hill recently, it's just a fascinating neighborhood in our country, frankly. Don't you agree, Joseph? It's a very nice, beautiful place.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's a very diverse area. Lots of, restaurants and coffee shops, and Cal Anderson Park is really nice to be in, and the light rail's up here, so it's easy to get up here, and yeah, it's a great neighborhood. I've really enjoyed living here, but this past month has not been super enjoyable. I'm not going to lie; it's been pretty stressful to live through.
Yeah, Joseph, we appreciate your time this morning. Maybe get some breakfast, and we'll see you in the gang on New Day. Appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you,
Michelle.
All right, the time now is 7:48. So let's give you a recap of what happened this morning. We know that the CHOP was cleared out maybe less than an hour. 13 arrests have been on record so far from the Seattle Police Department. We also heard from Chief Carmen Best probably within an hour ago, and she said that the police are not yet in the building. They are not yet in the East Precinct, but they did do a search of the building. They cleared it out. They have not moved in at this point, but that area will be off limits. The mayor's order makes it very clear that it is off limits to people at this point, and you could be arrested if you go into that area. Also, I touched base with our field crews. Doug Dillon is a photojournalist out in the area, and he says that if you're not a resident, you should not be in that area as well, and that's very clear. So when will things get back to normal? When will we see the regular Capitol Hill? That has yet to be seen, of course, in the coming days. But we also know that Human Services, Seattle Human Services Department is out on scene as well. Again, kind of reiterating that there was this concerted effort between city organizations and the police department, because not only has CHOP been cleared at this point, we know that HSD is out helping people who are homeless and in that area. So we know that the HSD made at least 124 engagements, as they call them. Some of those are duplicated, but within the last couple of days, really, they've been able to refer at least more than a dozen people to shelters. Also, they said 19 people to service providers that they've been able to connect. And then in the coming days, a lot of people will want to get their stuff back. So they are holding on to possessions for people. No word yet exactly how they're going to get those back, but we heard from some protesters who said, I really want my artwork back, or, we saw tents being cleared. So certainly there will be people who want their belongings back. So far, the message is that they're going to get those things back, but no word yet on how. So we do know that outreach workers are going to continue to stay in that area, and I'm just kind of looking at some of the blog posts out there to see what is happening from HSD. But again, it looks like the people in CHOP will get services rendered to them if they need it, Jake.
Michelle, we're looking live again here at live video streaming from what is called Converge Media. It is a local independent outlet that has been very, very, it's just fantastic coverage, frankly, on what's been happening with the CHOP and all that's surrounding it. There are reporting, according to Converge Media, that the city will continue with Human Services cleanup today. No doubt the city's navigation team, as it's called, will be down meeting with folks who are considered homeless, trying to find them just a safer place to be. CHOP it's just not a safe place. It's been lawless, from the chief's words. There have been 2 murders. There have been 4 separate shootings, at least, and multiple people injured. And as we see from this Converge Media video streaming here on your screen this morning, it's just a mess. And it's going to take some serious time to not only clean it up, but sort through people's belongings. And within the last 4 or 5 years, a new procedure has been put into place to collect these belongings, store them in a place that the potential owner could come back to get them before they are eventually discarded. So if you're wondering how that process works, that is something that is underway right now. And again, to recap, this has been an operation underway since about 3 hours ago. It was almost to the minute we started to see Seattle police moving in to the so-called CHOP in very large numbers with the goal of getting to that East Precinct, clearing everybody out under an emergency order from Mayor Jenny Durkan signed overnight. And in the words of the police chief, Michelle, a few moments ago, Black Lives Matter. Here comes, looks like Police Chief Durkan again. These are live pictures. I'm sorry, Police Chief Best, thank you. Live pictures here as she assesses what's going on. In her words earlier, Michelle, as we heard her say, Black Lives Matter, she wants the meaningful movement to continue, just not like this.
Yeah, she wants meaningful dialogue, and that will be a big question for a lot of people, how to move this message forward. A lot of people felt like the message was lost in these last few days, especially. So moving forward, how do we do that? Now, we are also trying to get inside the CHOP this morning to see if we can get a better look. We're seeing this live image from Chief Carmen Best, but, you know, can we get that vantage point? We will certainly try. In the meantime, Michael Crow has been talking to protesters all morning long, and here's listen into how he caught up with one of them.
Crazy because people were in their tents and they were sleeping, and to see them actually like drag people out their tents and whatnot, it's crazy to me because people were just actually being here peacefully. But I also can understand why they're here because of the violence. So we knew it was coming, you know what I mean, because of that violence. So Mayor Jenny had to do something.
All right, so this is a live look now at the CHOP zone from our crews on the ground there. We have been in continuous coverage since about 5 o'clock this morning, and here it is 7:54 at this time. You know, some of the protesters that Michael had spoken with said that they did not hear those warnings to disperse in that area, but a lot of our crews heard that. Also, Joseph Suttner, who we've been talking to all morning, who is our colleague of ours and works at New Day, said that he could hear it from his apartment building. But of course, if you're on the ground, there is a potential that you did not hear those warning signs or hear those warnings. But again, this has been a concerted effort between police and the city of Seattle releasing this 48-hour emergency proclamation. Data has been rolled out along with it, talking about the at least 65 incidents that police have been investigating over these last 3 weeks, including larceny, homicide, assaults. They were saying, okay, if you can have a peaceful protest, that's one thing, but this area has become lawless and brutal. Those were the two words that Chief Carmen Best used to describe the CHOP zone. So this is the situation we are in at 7:55. It looks like things are peaceful and calm, but again, we're just keeping track of any stragglers and seeing what moves forward, Jake.
And we want to apologize too for anything you may have seen or read. It's tough to look anywhere in the CHOP, frankly, and not see something that may be offensive to others. So we apologize for that. Want to get another view of what is happening here. This is from a separate side of the CHOP zone. You can see city crews now moving in again with their construction equipment, their trucks, to start removing some of the barricades. They're gigantic concrete barricades. There are tents. There are things that need to be pulled physically out of the road to officially clear CHOP. Also, we have Andre Taylor on the phone again this morning. Andre, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, good. Thanks for being with us this morning. You've been so gracious with your time. Andre is one of the original organizers of the protest and leader of Not This Time. Your thoughts, Andre, now seeing this unfold 3 hours after it began?
It's like I said before, this is something that is coming to an ugly end, and you would wish that it had not come to an ugly end, because we don't know how we will think about this later on. Will we see this as young folks coming together to offer their expressions and their protests, or will we see this as a place of where lives were taken and where there was crying? I don't know how we're going to remember this place, but it doesn't help that it ended in such a low point.
Mm-hmm. Moving the dialogue forward, we've heard it even from the police chief this morning. She wants to continue the dialogue, continue the meaningful message, just not like this. give me one example of what you would want to see, a very specific example of something the mayor or police chief can do to make a permanent, meaningful message, dialogue moving forward. Give us one idea.
Well, I don't think that there's one idea. I think that the idea the governor has already agreed to the mayor has already agreed to, that she's going to give $100 million into communities of color, grassroots organizations. I don't know that any governor has given that much money to date. And I think she said that she's put a down payment. She's going to put a down payment on that because of our budget, the $20 million down payment. Now, the fact of the matter is people might not believe it. You know, I am a consultant to the mayor, and I have full autonomy in what I do, and so I will be there to make sure that the rest of that is that she's committed to, that she'll do. I've never seen her lie about anything about as far as doing for communities of color. My organization, Africa Town, and many other organizations that get funding from the city to this day. But for her to say she's going to now give $100 million, I think that's a giant number, and I think that we can begin to work with that as we're in these conversations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a show of action from her.
Yeah. Audrey Taylor, so gracious with your time. We appreciate your important perspective. Thank you. Michelle?
If you are just joining us from home, we have been in continuing coverage both on King and Kong as police have cleared out the CHOP zone in Capitol Hill in Seattle. 8 o'clock this morning looks very different and quiet now, and CHOP has been dismantled since a little after 5 o'clock this morning. Police moved out protesters and they have reclaimed the police department, the East Precinct there. And this has been really a concerted effort between police and the city of Seattle and other city organizations, releasing a 48-hour emergency proclamation. Also, they've rolled out data on the criminal activity that has taken place as well in the last 3 weeks. So Michael Crow has been following this all morning long. He joins us live now with the very latest. Michael, good morning.
Hey guys, hi. So this is the core CHOP zone, right, that we've seen right in front of the East Precinct. This is where earlier this morning we were showing you those pictures of police pushing protesters out of this area down 12th going south. You can see here, this is what remains now that the sun has risen, right? That is the East Precinct you're seeing right there. We are watching as crews dismantle the barriers there. They're taking down those wood kind of facades that helped make a taller barrier to make it more visible. They look to be saving that art that was on the barriers. I can't see exactly where it's going, but there are city crews here, police, all kind of working through just all of the debris that remains. A couple minutes ago, we watched as Carmen Best, the chief, of course, entered the East Precinct. We saw her walk inside. We have not spoken to her right here personally, but certainly lots of heavy equipment arriving because there is just a ton of debris that remains now, right? You've got protest signs put up on the walls. There's the wood barricading the East Precinct. There's these concrete barriers. There's the tents and all of the kind of stuff that comes with the folks that were occupying this area. There's also a very strong smell here that is not pleasant because we saw those porta potties down there where the truck, the honey bucket truck, is working that were tipped over as protesters kind of made a last-ditch effort to barricade this area as they were pushed south down 12th earlier today. So that is the scene here. You know, the smell of tipped porta potties and just a lot of debris that is being cleared out, but not a single protester in sight, certainly. A couple of media here with us. I think we are going to get pushed another block up away from this area because of the heavy equipment. We are saying that we would like to obviously stay here and see what is happening firsthand. But that is the scene. We're seeing, front loader brought in, and we're just going to see as they try to kind of clean up this street in this effort to reopen this area that has been known as CHOP for so long. I don't know if it's too soon to call it no longer CHOP, but this is where it was, and certainly this occupation looks to be coming to an end as these city crews kind of enforce descend here.
And the conditions that you're listing there, Michael, making it yet again another unsafe, unhealthy place for humans to live and be. frankly. Michael Crow with just tremendous effort on the ground yet again this morning. Thanks, Michael. Let's get over to Kira Alfaland, who is also down there at the CHOP near the Seattle Police East Precinct. Kira, what are you seeing from your vantage point, my friend?
Yeah, good morning. Well, there are just a handful of protesters still here at 12th and Pike. Many have been moved out. Of course, they were all pushed out of the CHOP zone. Many peacefully left. Others kind of had some resistance, but this is what's going on right now. There are just a couple left behind here. This area now, the CHOP zone, is now off limits to these demonstrators. So about an hour ago, Chief Carmen Best held a press conference. She said after weeks of violence in this area, multiple shootings and 2 deaths, enough is enough.
Our job is to protect and to serve the community. Our job is to support peaceful demonstrations. But what has happened here on these streets over the last 2 weeks, few weeks that is lawless and it's brutal. And bottom line, it is simply unacceptable.
This morning, local FBI and Bellevue police resources assisted Seattle PD as they got demonstrators out. At least 13 arrests were made, 3 of those at least at this intersection at Pike and 12th. So city crews plan to clear out the area. Chief Best said she supports peaceful demonstrations and Black Lives Matter, but said when it comes to the violence that has happened here, it had to stop. So again, city crews are working to clear this area out. Police are moving some of those barricades out here, moving the remainder of those barricades. They have not gone back into the building yet. They did to just make sure it was clear, but they haven't actually moved back inside. They're hoping to do that as soon as possible. And again, city crews are here helping to clear out this area here. Just a couple protesters left behind. Live here from Capitol Hill, I'm Kira Alfaland, King 5 News.
All right, thank you so much, Kira. We want to take a live shot now, and what we're seeing SDOT workers are in the CHOP zone as well. They are bringing in equipment and moving barricades at this point again. So that is continued movement happening in the CHOP zone and making that area whole again. Now, we do want to give you an update from the Seattle Police Department because as of about 20 minutes ago, officers have made 23 arrests, they say, in the CHOP zone for a range of things, ranging from failure to disperse, obstruction, resisting arrest, and also assault. And then what you're seeing here is that one of the people who were arrested, a 29-year-old man, was in possession of a large metal pipe and then also a kitchen knife when he was taken into custody. And the police department used this ruler to show how big the kitchen knife is. And you can also see that there is some sort of there is something on that knife. I'm not a forensic expert. It kind of looks like blood, but that is something that the police have been doing all morning long, is having someone dedicated to this Twitter account to hopefully give transparency to the public on what they are doing. Again, 23 arrests in since 7:45. That makes that is counting because continues to rise because all morning long it's been about 13. So we're just seeing an uptick in arrests this morning, Jake.
Yeah, that's disturbing to see that. You can't see that knife that you're talking about. If you're on Twitter, I urge you to go to the Seattle Police Department website and the Twitter account and see it. It's a serious weapon. All right, live pictures back here again as crews get into position. Just behind, I believe this is Doug Dillon, just behind our photographer here, they have those city crews moving in with excavators and trying to clear things out physically. Another observation I'm able to make here, traffic is now moving through the CHOP zone. Michelle, that's probably the first cars I've seen from the general public able to drive through. They wasted no time. The barrier's up, and now cars are driving through. I'm pretty sure that, I'm getting a little backwards maybe on our live shots, guys, but it looks like that was an area that was closed, that's now open to traffic. Maybe Kira can answer that question on the ground there, but that would be some progress, Michelle, wouldn't you say? I mean, letting the general public physically move through there with their vehicles, it's a big deal.
Yeah, I would say that would be a big move. It's unclear, though, whether they would be able to stop, though, and maybe patronize a business, though, right? I mean, from what we understand, that area is still off limits for folks. under the mayor's order, the 48-hour emergency proclamation. And when we talked to Chief Carmen Best, now it's been probably an hour ago, she was saying she didn't know when that area would be back to normal. You know, someone said, okay, well, are we going to see the regular Capitol Hill tomorrow? That question was not, able to be answered. But let's go ahead and take a look at Cal Anderson Park. You know, earlier we have seen police trying to clear out that area. They were looking at restrooms, they were clearing out tents. We also know that Human Services, the Human Services Department of Seattle, has been on scene trying to reach out to people and have actually made some fairly decent headway, I guess you would say, in terms of placing people in the right places. So there have been people who are living unsheltered or living homeless, living as homeless folks. 18 people were referred to shelters and 19 people had connections to services, and that number is continuing to grow as well as HSD continues to stay on scene there, Jake.
For those of you tuning in here this morning from Whatcom County to Centralia and everywhere in between, you are now watching Seattle Police clearing out the so-called CHOP zone on Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood and reclaiming the East Precinct. We have crews on the ground covering this all morning long. It's been about 3 hours now since we first started to see police moving in. Michael Crow has been down there in the thick of it since the start, really since weeks ago. Michael, take it away.
Yeah, so first a quick update. We have been asked to move back to 13th here, 12th, of course, where the East Precinct is. They're moving heavy equipment in right now, and they've asked all of the couple of media that had kind of made their way in there to move back. So we have a little bit less of a vantage point, but we can see as they work here. Here with me is our photographer, Mike, who had this morning was embedded with police to provide an independent camera. So he was with officers and granted some access to see what was going on and provide this to our media outlet as well as other media outlets to provide that independent camera of what we saw this morning. So you had a little bit of a different perspective from where we were on the kind of protester side of the line. Mike, can you just kind of tell me about what you saw? Because you've just come out of the East Precinct, right?
Yeah, I just came out of the East Precinct. SWAT has spent the last half hour or so clearing it, just seeing what sort of damage is inside. From what we can tell, it doesn't look like anyone was able to get inside and do any sort of damage in there. All the officers that normally are in the East Precinct started going back in. They were very excited to go back inside and kind of just be back, and they kept saying, hey, we're home. That's what they kept saying. Chief Best walked through, was able to look around a little bit and talk to them, and so the police are very happy to be inside. Chief Best also told them that she's already been talking with residents around here, and it's kind of a relief that they're back there.
Sure. So we saw from kind of that protester side, right, as police pushed this morning, and we saw some pepper spray and those batons that they used to kind of force people back. Just talk to me about kind of the tactics that you saw from your perspective of, how the police behaved and also how protesters behaved today.
Yeah, so police, they moved in quickly. There was probably a couple hundred of them out here, I would say, and they came in, formed a perimeter around sort of a couple blocks around here, and then they started giving orders that to dismiss, which the mayor had signed last night, and told them that they gave them a couple of minutes warning and said if they did not dismiss that they would start being arrested, and that's what they did. They started just moving up, and you had a few people that kind of stood their ground, and they were immediately arrested. And it didn't seem like there was too much incident that went into that. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And just talk to me about some of the other things you saw. Did anything kind of recovered, that kind of thing?
There were a few weapons that were recovered. I saw like a baseball bat and a machete, like an axe type thing. But it doesn't seem like any of them were used, but they were definitely recovered and out here as police were moving through.
Yeah. Just what struck you, I guess, I'm curious because it did move fast, right? And we've heard from some protesters this morning saying, we didn't hear the order to disperse or something like that. We heard here, Mark and I and you heard that order to disperse. But, I mean, did it seem like there was some confusion at all in just the speed of the whole thing?
I think the speed of it was moving in here quick was kind of the point, but there were clear orders to disperse, and they were given multiple times, and they were being given throughout the entire process that they were moving down the street, moving moving people. They did the same thing at Cal Anderson Park after they cleared out the precinct here. They went over there and did the same exact thing, pulled people out of tents. We're telling them that they were unlawful to be there and that they would be arrested if they did not move.
It is interesting to see kind of the end of CHOP, right, after it's been here for so long. I mean, certainly people have mostly left the area. Is there anything that kind of stands out to you from what you have kind of witnessed personally this morning as, you know, a witness to history kind of here?
Yeah, I mean, I've been here every night for the last couple of weeks, and I think what made it just go so smoothly, I guess you would say, is there's been just far fewer people here. And I think with the amount of force of the police that were here, they were able to easily come in and just overwhelm the people that were here and just move them out with very little incident.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mike. I'm looking forward to seeing all that video. So Mike, of course, our photographer that was allowed to embed with SPD this morning to provide an independent camera. Mark, don't back up. You're going to step into somebody there. To provide that independent camera so that we could see from, you know, a little bit better vantage point what was going on and share that with other media outlets, of course, because it is important to make sure that we have that independent perspective, a journalist there to witness what is going on from everyone involved, which is our job. So that is what Mike has been doing this morning, and I believe has just gone off to kind of debrief on that. So we will be catching up with him a little bit later, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he captured this morning. We, of course, saw some from our perspective, which usually when we end up on these things, we are not allowed past a line, right? We are on the street with the public, and so we got pushed back, right, as police moved down 12th. Telling people to get out of here and head south on 12th. So just to kind of give you again that perspective, we are standing here by the fire station. We're up on 13th right now. That is that core zone of that occupied area right there. Heavy equipment moving, barriers, they're loading it up on a flatbed there. We are kind of seeing their cops are leaving, honestly. We're seeing kind of those folks in tactical gear and SWAT gear taking a break. You know, it is not quite as tense as it has been, but certainly there is a perimeter being held around Cal Anderson Park and around this precinct. Several blocks where people are being allowed to leave and not allowed to come back in, making sure that, folks kind of disperse through this area as police have declared it unlawful to gather here, and the city has, of course. So that's what we've got right now.
Yeah, good to see the heat getting turned down there, and I'm with you. Just incredible access for Mike and for you, and just an incredible job, my friend, as always. Thanks for your update. Be safe. Back to Sky King here for a look overhead, and back to Michelle for a look at least one or two of the weapons that were seized this morning. Michelle, what are we learning there?
Yeah, so we know that at 7:45 there have been at least 23 arrests this morning. This is the latest coming out from Seattle police. And from a wide range of arrests, from failure to disperse, obstruction, resisting arrest, and assault. But take a look. This is an image of a kitchen knife taken from a 29-year-old man who was taken into custody. And you can see the ruler there to show the size of that knife. And, there appears to be maybe some blood on that knife as well. Of course, I'm not a forensic expert, but it does look like a rather large kitchen knife. Also, we saw a metal pipe confiscated from that man as well. And that kind of goes along with what Mike Perry, our chief photographer, was saying, that that police have been able to confiscate some weapons this morning, including baseball bats, things like that. The Seattle Police Department also said that they've uncovered some improvised spike strips from the CHOP zone, which might be interesting to some folks. These were designed to puncture vehicle tires in the area of CHOP, and you can see just someone putting what appears to be nails through plywood there. So those are some improvised spike strips, and people discovering things now as they are cleaning up the CHOP zone. But yeah, very interesting there, Jake.
No, definitely, and scary to see some of the weapons that were pulled out of there. And a reminder for you at home, this was not a safe place. 65, at least, total offenses the chief and SPD compiled over the past several weeks there in the CHOP. Everything from aggravated assault, extortion, larceny, theft. No official charges yet, but murder could likely be one of them, with 2 deaths in recent weeks. Both teenagers, a 16-year-old boy shot and killed in the CHOP earlier this week. Last week, a 19-year-old also killed. So as the chief put it, enough is enough. Looking now live at your screen above Seattle Police East Precinct and the what is left of the so-called CHOP, city crews now seem to be outnumbering police at this particular corner as they start to remove some of those barriers. It has been a compilation of tents and boxes and barriers and you name it down there, essentially blocking all the city streets. No doubt over the next few hours, based on the kind of progress that we're witnessing here live, it's all going to be gone. I mean, they're going to have it cleared out, I would guess, by the end of the day. Again, that's just a presumption based on the number of city crews we are now seeing. Sky King refueled and back with us here live this morning. In the upper right-hand portion of your screen, another angle from the so-called CHOP zone. Mission essentially complete in large part when you consider what police have been able to do over the past 3 hours. It was 2 minutes to 5 this morning when the order came down. It was released publicly, at least, from Mayor Durkan, Michelle, that executive order of public safety ordering everyone to clear the CHOP. That is when police moved in. It was about 25 minutes from that point when essentially they had made it to the East Precinct, moved in, started clearing it, and it has now been cleared for safety reasons. And now begins the cleanup. It's going to be hopefully the people, and I'm thinking too, hopefully the people who are homeless, who decided CHOP was a safe place for them to be. I really hope that they were able to find a safe place to go this morning. The city's navigation team, Michelle, is down there helping them out.
Yeah, they've made contact with a few people, and they also said that anyone who has belongings, they are going to try to keep those belongings and store them for folks. So there's no word yet on how people will get those belongings back. But nonetheless, there is that effort being made. And I want to just give a clarification because I've been in contact with one of our crews, specifically Doug Dillon, and he said that the vehicle that we saw going through the CHOP zone, driving through, was not a private vehicle. Those were worker vehicles and police vehicles. So they are letting, he says, a few people walk by 13th, but they can't go any further past or farther past 13th. So that's just a little tidbit of information because, you know, when will Capitol Hill look normal again? When will it be back to business? Not this morning for sure, but again, we had maybe thought we had seen a private vehicle go through, but that was not the case. Jake, it's been really interesting to see because this has been such a concerted effort between the city, city services, and the police department coming up and releasing this 48-hour proclamation, emergency proclamation, and then rolling out data that has said this CHOP zone has not been a safe place. You've mentioned it before. We've mentioned it this morning, talking about those 65 incident reports that have taken place, 2 of which were homicide. And that is just what the police could investigate. We've heard during these last 3 weeks of crimes, potential crimes happening, but police have not been welcomed to investigate. And even though we know that there is a homicide investigation, we understand that the crime scene has been corrupted as well. So moving forward, it will be interesting to see how the police continues to investigate those incidents and also close those cases. And then we've got to talk about the dialogue moving forward that this community wants, the peaceful protesting that has been taking place. What happens next when it comes to reallocating funds throughout the police department or defunding the police department? This is not an issue that is going to go away. We've seen this in Minneapolis. We've seen this in New York, where city councils have already decided, yes, we're going to defund the police department, and this is how we're going to start reallocating money. This is on the minds of Jenny Durkan. You just heard from Andre Taylor, who said he works with the mayor and she has made some big promises. He intends for her to follow through with those. So, you know, yes, a lot of focus today, the headlines today will be CHOP zone cleared, right? But now the work has to be done in terms of the dialogue.
Yeah, and if the headline at this moment were to be written, it might be CHOP being cleaned. Quite the effort on our screen here. And just to, you know, put an exclamation point on what you just said, Michelle, I mean, the dialogue has to continue. I mean, I don't think anybody down there, you know, including a lot of the cops, and of course the demonstrators, have anything against Black Lives Matter movement. It's not about the message this morning. It's about reclaiming the city streets. It's about approaching, the conversation in a safer, more meaningful way. The original organizers were disappointed in recent weeks about what they'd seen from CHOP. So there is a huge demand for the message, the dialogue to continue. What that will look like has yet to be seen as Sky King relocates here. I want to get back to a little bit of video here just to frame up again what we've been talking about all morning. If you're just waking up and joining us, we are simulcasting on both King 5 and King 5 mornings on Kong to bring you the latest in the so-called CHOP zone. This from a few hours earlier this morning when Seattle police moved in large numbers to reclaim the city streets. Protesters were giving much resistance to the police in recent days, recent minutes. At least 23 arrests have been made this morning, but it was in relative quick order that police were able to go in and clear out the CHOP once and for all. Here is one of those protesters who spoke with us at that point.
We're being shut down right now as peaceful protesters because of a pre-existing gang problem that already existed in Cal Anderson Park that the Seattle Police Department is all accountable for.
Sky King giving us an image again of another street corner here, same street corner. This is 11th and Pine. The top right portion of your screen there, that building with the sort of blue trim, that is the Seattle Police East Precinct. And next to it as well, Michelle, our businesses. They have been, coronavirus still looms large over everything. Of course, if you're a business owner, the virus, the pandemic has been a crippling event. But for those business owners down there, who many have even filed lawsuits against the city, this is a massive relief. To not be able to go to your home or your business, that has to be just a horrible feeling.
Well, we've heard from a lot of business owners who have said they would only speak anonymously to King 5 because they did not want to get their messages mixed, that they didn't support the Black Lives Matter movement. A lot of business owners have said we want to support the movement, the peaceful protesting, but what is happening in CHOP, or what has happened recently in CHOP, was not safe. And so, we even saw businesses in the very beginning helping the protesters, offering food and water and services to folks. And when things turned deadly for two people, and we had those 4 shootings, that was when people really started to feel that the message had been lost, right? And even when we talked to Andre Taylor, he said something happened, the message was lost. He hated to be right about CHOP, he said, and he hated that it has ended on this low note for a lot of people because there is an important message that needs to be moved forward in his eyes. And one thing that Andre Taylor is doing, and we've mentioned this on the news, is he is part of the governor's new task force that really is going to be looking at independent investigations involving police use of force. That is one way that people are trying to move this dialogue forward when we're talking about how Black Lives Matter and the protests there. This review of the I-940 structure of an investigative protocol, that is something that is really on top of mind from the top down from Washington State. And there are a number of people on this task force, including Andre Taylor, who lost his brother to a police shooting back in 2016. So this is certainly, just one way the dialogue moves forward, but it has been a mixed bag, right, for a lot of people who are directly impacted by CHOP, whether it was business owners or residents, people who wanted to support the movement but did not want to support the violence that was happening inside.
It's interesting too. It makes you wonder about what this all would have looked like if it weren't for the coronavirus pandemic. I go down there to CHOP, and you see a lot of the same energy that you see at May Day protests, you name it in the city. Seattle is, famous for protests at this point. But nothing like the CHOP has ever happened before. And when you go down into it, you hear from people who, why are you here? Oh, I'm furloughed. Or why are you bringing food down here? Oh, I'm a furloughed chef and I had some extra time on my hands. Or this person you're working at a at a sort of community no-cop co-op, they called it, a little market. I said, well, how are you here? She goes, well, I work home remotely and I'm on a break. It's like, so people have more time on their hands, and it's been an interesting sort of confluence of events that created CHOP. And you can only hope that the message of change, the Black Lives Matter message, continues, putting aside all that's happened here in the CHOP zone as we look live at city crews doing their work this morning.
It's been interesting, Jake, to see this powder keg, as you mentioned. Let's talk about, just kind of give you a recap of what has happened this morning. We know that there have been more than 20 arrests this morning from Seattle police. They have confiscated weapons as well, including some fairly large kitchen knives, some baseball bats, a metal pipe. We know that the police have now have control of the East Precinct, though they haven't actually physically reclaimed it, so to speak. So we know that they've gone in, they've searched the precinct, and now it's been cleared, and eventually they will move in as well. But again, that area is off limits to the public. The mayor has been very clear in this proclamation on what will happen when people go there, and they're not allowed to go there unless you live there, of course. Again, that is part of the 48-hour proclamation, that emergency proclamation again. So it is off limits to people who want to patronize businesses or whatever until we get the lift. We will, of course, keep you posted on that.
And if you are just now waking up with us here, it is July 1st. The 1st of July met with quite the activity in the downtown Seattle Capitol Hill core. As we look live here, you're joining us on both King 5 and King 5 on Kong as we get you going on a Wednesday. An emergency order from the mayor of Seattle was issued overnight, demanding that everyone and anyone in the Capitol Hill Organized Protest Zone, or CHOP, be dispersed, be removed from that particular street corner, including Cal Anderson Park. That was at 4:58 this morning that order was made public. It was right at about that time that we saw Seattle police clearly in a fortified position, a very well thought out response, moved in those early morning hours when most people were asleep, and reclaimed the streets. As our Michael Crow put it, they outnumbered protesters 10-1, and they made quick work, 20 to 25 minutes or so of brief confrontation, but otherwise peaceful clearing of the CHOP. As Michelle just mentioned, 23 arrests made, multiple weapons seized, and the work now continues still. It's not over yet. Police were investigating some suspicious vehicles that were driving around. There was concern about the West Precinct, which is a mile and a half or so from the east. The police chief putting those fears to rest. She's saying everything appears safe right now. Police have moved back into the East Precinct to clear the building. It has been deemed safe. And now we watch live over Sky King as the cleanup begins. Let's get down to Michael Crow, who has been covering it from the start. Michael, tell us about where things stand now, coming up on 4 hours since the start of the police presence down there.
Sure. I mean, kind of all quiet, right? Compared to the push that we saw early this morning. We're up at 13th and Pine. That's the East Precinct right down there. You can see all those tents, that debris that is left over after protesters left. We were up there for a little bit. Police have asked us to come back here because they're moving heavy equipment in and out of the area because there's just a lot of work to do, honestly. There is a lot of kind of detritus there, stuff that was left over in the tents after police kind of ripped them up and pushed through and got those folks out of there. You heard those orders to disperse, of course, that we heard this morning, and then they moved in. We saw a little pepper spray. We saw a little scuffling, right, with some of those folks that didn't want to move. Obviously, you said that there were arrests made, but they are back in the East Precinct. It's right there, and kind of all quiet right now in terms of, I should say, like police response, but there is a bustle of city response. I mean, you can see that is an SPD truck coming in. You can see all those riot shields actually right there in the back of that truck. The apparatus response team, but lots of SDOT crews coming in and out. We've seen, front loaders with a jackhammer attachment to break up those cement barriers, large flatbeds to move all that stuff out of there. An update too, I was talking to a sergeant over on the far side of Cal Anderson Park who was telling me that there is plans to bring a team in that is going to catalog everything that was there kind of as evidence, right? So they want to make sure that they take pictures of what was where and why and that kind of thing and document it. And then they are planning on being able to release that to people. So there will be a process. I don't have a lot of details on that yet, but that is what I was told, is they want to document what was there and then release it to people, because we were hearing from some folks who were kind of upset about their belongings being trapped inside of Cal Anderson Park when police were not allowing any access. So again, city crews hard at work here, cleaning up what I guess you could say now was formerly the CHOP area, right? People have moved out here. We have not seen any protesters on this end. Maybe a group of 30 was coalescing on the far side of Cal Anderson Park, but that is where we are at right now, right here in Capitol Hill.
Yep, and just to continue on that point, Michael, the city's navigation team is, like you said, cataloging, as they typically do in these homeless camp cleanups. They put the stuff that belongs to folks in a special spot and they can go back to reclaim it. Michael, thank you. Let's get back live over the top here as we send it back to Michelle.
All right, thank you so much, Jake. We want to check in now with Kira Alfallen. She's been bouncing around the area. And Kira, I'm just wondering what you are seeing at this point.
Yeah, good morning, Michelle. Well, we are at 10th and Pike now. We're just a block away from Pine and Cal Anderson Park, where we're hearing that protesters or demonstrators are being pushed out of the park, being told that they will be trespassing if they do not leave. And we're also being told that some arrests could be made, but the police department has now regained control of the East Precinct in Capitol Hill, the CHOP zone. Those demonstrators have been moved out of the zone, and now we're hearing that zone is off limits. So about an hour ago, Chief Carmen Best actually held a press conference. She said after weeks of violence in this area, multiple shootings and 2 deaths, enough is enough.
Our job is to protect and to serve the community. Our job is to support peaceful demonstrations. But what has happened here on these streets over the last 2 weeks, few weeks that is lawless and it's brutal. And bottom line, it is simply unacceptable.
This morning, local FBI and Bellevue Police Resources assisted the Seattle Police Department as they moved demonstrators out of the CHOP zone. We know at least 23 arrests were made. Chief Best says she supports peaceful demonstrations and Black Lives Matter, but she says when it comes to the violence, she has seen enough as enough. We also saw, once we were closer to the CHOP zone, some business owners kind of come out and cheer, thankful that police were moving people out of the area. They're hoping to see things go back to normal. We know that right now city crews are still working on clearing out that area. They are not back inside the building yet, but we do know once they can, they plan to do that as soon as possible and resume operations. I'm live here in Seattle, Kira Alfallen, King 5 News.
All right, thank you so much, Kira. Again, the time now is 8:35, and we have been in continuing coverage on both King and Kong, bringing you the very latest from the CHOP zone in Seattle as police moved in early this morning to clear out that zone and to move forward. As we have been mentioning this morning, we've received a lot of data, including videos and research of arrest records going back from the police department over the last 3 weeks. And now it is time to clean up this area. So we have seen SDOT crews move in, removing some miniature barriers, also barricades, excuse me. Also, we've seen them remove some homemade, I guess, or improvised spike strips that were made and designed to puncture vehicle tires in the area of CHOP. These are coming from people who were in that area, just nails basically in plywood. But the cleanup will begin. Who knows when we will see a regular Capitol Hill again? That is kind of like what is the next thing for businesses and for the people who live there. Right now, we know that there's a 48-hour proclamation that says this area is off limits to folks. But again, I think a lot of people want to know, okay, when are we going to see the regular Capitol Hill, Jake?
And it is now 8:36 this morning, coming up on 4 hours since we first saw police fortifying in that area of Capitol Hill. Let's get back to those early moments. This about, say, 15, 20 minutes after police started moving in. Early in the days of CHOP, you saw a very similar scene, but this time around, as noted by Michael Crow, police just had the protesters outnumbered 10-1, as he put it. It's just a much different scene. Same tactics, police taking back the streets, moving everyone out. It was about a half hour later or so when we saw most of that work completed and Seattle police taking back control of that area. A local news agency called Converge Media, a group of citizen journalists, has been following this from the start. Hear from one of the organizers of Converge Media, Omari Salisbury, about what he saw.
At very little resistance. We didn't see much force. It looked like the discharge of a rubber bullet when they were very first there by 12th Avenue Arts, and then affected an arrest. It looked like some pepper spray was used. But to be honest, the Seattle Police Department basically reclaimed the precinct in less than 30 minutes and at 5 feet at a time with the bicycle officers out in front.
Omari Salisbury there with Converge Media. They're a good follow on Twitter, too, for updates. City crews here now live, continuing their work, removing barricades and belongings that were there in the middle of the street. Remember, this is right outside the Seattle Police East Precinct there on the right. Looks like they're removing some of those wood panelings from the East Precinct, which is indicative of a new day for that building, which has been boarded up now for quite some time. Michelle, I'll touch on that in just a quick minute there. But all is safe at the moment, according to Chief Best. 23 arrests have been made now, according to Seattle Police. Everything from vandalism to a whole variety of things. This coming after some dark days in a history of this particular street corner, Michelle.
Yeah, Jake, in mentioning all of this, let's take a look back at the timeline. We know that CHOP formed about 3 weeks ago. It was originally called CHAZ, but the Capitol Hill Organized Protest, or CHOP, is the name that everyone's stuck with. This took several blocks of East Pine Street. The goal was to draw attention to racial injustice and police brutality and inequities. That was also followed by these cries to defund the Seattle Police Department. But since then, CHOP has been marred with violence and other issues. I think the big headlines were the 4 shootings that injured 6 people, left 2 people dead. And just the reiteration, these are, young lives, 19-year-old and a 16-year-old. Now, the city tried to remove those some of those barricades last Friday, but they backed off after they were met with protesters. Things got pretty heated on this morning's show last Friday when protesters were laying in the streets there. So SDOT crews finally managed to take them away yesterday, only to see protesters put up these makeshift barriers. And again, right now we know that the police department has reclaimed the East Precinct, but there is no word yet on when they will physically move in. But, who knows? Today could be the day when they do that. They've already cleared that building, so we will just have to wait and see there. But lots of cleanup. Michael Crow mentioned doesn't smell too good there right now because as protesters were moving out, they dumped over a lot of honey buckets and still mini barricades and improvised spike strips. A lot of damage left behind. And a lot of folks also still want to go back and reclaim their items. There is artwork there. There are tents. There are belongings. And a lot of people need social services right now as well. Connection to shelters or potentially service providers. So that is the latest, but this has been 3 weeks now in the making, Jake. Okay, I'm going to also we're going to take a live look now overlooking the CHOP zone. And as you can see, we have seen a lot of SDOT crews now back at work. Again, time now is 8:41 there. You can see they are dressed in their protective gear and their hard hats. And we're wondering what they're going to do with those miniature concrete barriers in the middle of CHOP. We also see those canopies, those tents set up. Those are all going to have to be removed, including the Jeep there that we see. So this is all something that crews will be working on throughout the day. But in the meantime, Jake, I just think it's going to be a pretty long day for a lot of SDOT crews. But they're finally able to do the work that they originally had wanted to do last Friday.
Yeah, and they were met by protesters and unable to do it then, certainly happening now. Worth noting, we have not yet heard from Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan at this point in person. We have heard from Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best multiple times. Mayor Durkan, though, did issue that emergency order overnight, signing it, allowing police to disperse anyone and everyone from this particular street corner here in the Capitol Hill area. There has been no indication that police have officially reestablished the force there in the East Precinct there, which is the building there on the right side of your screen. But they have been able to get in, according to the chief, and clear the building and make sure that no one was inside, so it has been deemed safe. And if you are just joining us now at 18 minutes to the top of the hour, we are preempting the Today Show for updates on the major developments on Capitol Hill in Seattle, the clearing once and for all of the Capitol Hill organized protest zone. The police chief saying this morning she wants the message to continue. She says, quote, Black Lives Matter, but enough is enough. She wants to continue the meaningful dialogue, but wants to also regain the streets. We have been hearing from our field crews on the ground. There were some firecrackers that were sort of lit off earlier this morning that had some people on the edge of their seats, hoping for the best there. And again, those were confirmed to be firecrackers. 23 separate arrests. Multiple weapons have been seized. I'm also looking at a lot of social media this morning from some of our crews there, Michael Crow among them, showing some of the moments when it really became tense at about in the 5 o'clock hour when we started to see some familiar sights. And here we are in the upper left portion of your screen. That is a pipe, a weapon that was seized by Seattle police. To the right there, you're seeing also other weapons, spike strips, according to Seattle police, that were found among the protesters. Also finding many who live in that neighborhood who have a tremendous empathy for those that maybe they see eye to eye with when it comes to the message. There are many in that neighborhood who have actually been outspoken and even joined a collection of lawsuits against the city for what they call their lack of response in recent weeks to all that's happened in Capitol Hill. And we've heard from residents who are relieved in general to start feeling safe again as they leave their home there in really a beautiful portion of our city, Capitol Hill. Michelle, it has been since June 8th that we have seen Seattle police getting into the East Precinct. Seems to be a new day.
Yeah, it has. And let's check in now with Michael Crow, who's been live all over that area this morning. Michael, you've had a very busy morning. Tell us what you're seeing now.
Sure. So kind of the same situation we had for you before kind of continues here, right? We're at Pine and 13th here. That is the East Precinct down there on the left part of that corner. And you can see it's just a swarm of SDOT pickup trucks and dump trucks, and some front loaders were brought in the last hour or so. And they are just furiously at work to clear the debris in front of the East Precinct. I mean, we've seen, what's left of barriers, protest signs, some of the stuff from people that were living there, tents, stuff like that all kind of went into a pile, right, as police moved through this morning. Police have cleared this area. I mean, that is what we are seeing right now. There are not protesters left in CHOP. There was a group that last check over on the far side of Kelly Anderson, but it's certainly not, more than 20 or 30 that we saw. So certainly people living here in Capitol Hill have woken up to an interesting morning as they, look out their windows and see this police response and this SDOT response. But it appears that CHOP has been cleared out. We've seen Carmen Best, police chief, of course, enter the East Precinct. We are going to learn more, I think, today, right, as we get some images back from other cameras that we've had on the scene, and as we just hear from people about what has happened. We have seen some pepper spray get deployed. We've seen police use that move back tactic that they do, where they kind of push in a line to move people back. We know arrests have happened, but here on Capitol Hill, the scene is relatively quiet in terms of law enforcement response. They are holding that cordon kind of around several blocks here just to make sure that people don't recongregate here. But yeah, cleanup continues. That's where we're at. It's going to be interesting to see how this develops. We were asked to move back here about a block. We were right up there. And I think, as you noted, the smell, because porta potties were toppled by protesters as they left the area. You know, I saw barricades with screws driven through them facing out towards Pike this morning. So all of that is going to be, I think, really difficult to clean up. It will take time. I'm not an expert. I couldn't tell you how long, but the process continues here on Capitol Hill as the city kind of has moved through to reclaim the occupied CHOP zone this morning.
Michael Crow.
All right, thanks.
Yep, Michael Crow doing a heck of a job down there again for us this morning. Let's hope they clean up the porta potty mess. I just had a thought, Michelle, as well. Earlier today, I think we had an update, but to complicate some of the matters in the clearing process, a woman began going into labor down there. Michelle, what was the update on that?
Well, it apparently she didn't end up needing to go to a hospital, and she didn't need medical transport. So, you know, being in that situation a couple of years ago, I know that sometimes you have false labor, and maybe that was the case there. But, you know, fire crews did go out to, or I should say the police called fire for help to assist her needs. And then upon assisting, they found out that she did not need to go to the hospital.
Good. We're hoping the best for mom and baby. What a morning. Let's get down to Kira Alfalin. She has a close-up view of some of the cleanup and protesters remaining. Kira, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. There are still just a handful of protesters here outside at Pike and 12, just outside of the CHOP zone. We did just see moments ago a protester who refused to move to let this city truck come through. She sat right in front of this truck, refused to move, and forcefully move her because she would not get out. It's like there is still some tension here this morning. Continue to stay here at the line. SDOT crews are inside right now doing what they can to clean up some of this area to get it ready as they continue to clear the streets and as police decide when they will move back into the East Precinct there. But we did hear from Chief Carmen Best just about an hour ago. She said after weeks of violence in this area, multiple shootings and 2 deaths, enough is enough.
Kira Alfalin live at the scene there this morning with another update. Thanks, Kira. It's now 10 minutes to 9, and we are looking live again from Sky King as yet more city crews begin to arrive there outside the Seattle East Precinct in what I suppose you could formally now call the formal site of CHOP and what is left of it, but just a mess among city officials. And one of the operations that goes into a place like this, when you have so many homeless residents in Seattle also living in that area, is the city's navigation team, as it's called, goes from person to person and tries to personally connect these folks with the services they need to get into housing, get back on their feet. They are also among those working down there. That involves picking up the belongings and taking it to a secure location where presumably people can reunite with their belongings and find it at a later time. But they are asking anyone and everyone to not be in this area now as city crews do their work. And a lot of people living in that area getting a front row seat to history, really, Michelle. Joseph Suttner, our producer of New Day, among them, who lives basically right above that intersection, he's been giving us updates, says he just has not felt safe. I mean, violence is not new to Capitol Hill, and many of you texting and tweeting me about that this morning. And yes, I hear you. We know we cover crime on Capitol Hill. We're not saying it doesn't exist on Capitol Hill before this, but certainly fears and the dangers have been elevated in recent days, that according to people who live there.
So Jake?
Yep, go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. Just wanted to touch base because Chief Carmen Best, we know, has been out on the scene very early this morning, and we did catch up with her probably a little more than an hour, maybe an hour and a half ago. So we do want to listen to what she has to say about the East Precinct and moving forward.
Well, in terms of the East Precinct, the mayor's order makes it clear that this area is off limits at this time, and so no one should be in the area, and we'll be enforcing that fully. We have no other threats to any other facility at this time, but clearly, we'll be having additional staffing in all of our areas.
So again, you heard that the area there is off limits to people, unless of course you live there, I would imagine. But going back to what you were talking about, Jake, in terms of the human services department element, the navigational teams that are trying to reach people who are living unsheltered or living homeless in that area already, they are making some headway in that case. So they have said that they've made a list, or they've made 124 engagements, as they call them, or contacts basically, and some of them are duplicated efforts, but they have referred at least 18 people to shelters, 19 people to service providers. Those are really early figures, and they likely do not count this morning, but that is the effort that has been made probably over the last week or so to get some of the people who are living unsheltered the help that they need. And as you mentioned, Cal Anderson Park has a history of people who stay there overnight on a consistent basis, and were staying there before CHOP was ever formed. Yeah. Additionally, we know that there is an outreach tent located next to Seattle Central College. So I'm not sure about where that stands today, but that has been the case for the last couple of days, where people have been able to get some services there and connect people to resources. But that is an ongoing effort by the city, as they have made this proclamation and as they've made this sweep in CHOP to help those people who really do need services and who may have been kind of living in CHOP and getting some, food and some other services there that they maybe not have had access to before.
Yeah, everybody deserves a safe place to go, no doubt about that. And side note, the navigation team has been successful getting a lot of folks into some permanent housing. If you are just joining us this morning, expecting to see the Today Show, we will get to that momentarily. We are broadcasting still live to the top of the hour here as we report on the latest developments in the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle, which on June the 8th became the new home to what was called the Chaz, or Capitol Hill protest zone. At the time, it is just outside the police East Precinct. Today, it is no more. The police precinct has been reclaimed by Seattle police in an effort that began at about 5 a.m. local time, took about 20 or 30 minutes for police in riot gear using tactical maneuvers to rally together, pushing the remaining protesters out of the CHOP, reclaiming control of the precinct there on the east side, making 23 separate arrests with some resistance from protesters. Some weapons were seized, but otherwise no additional violence to report to you right now. And we do watch live as police and city crews begin the long, laborious effort of cleaning up Capitol Hill, which has been collecting a whole lot of stuff over the past 3 weeks, and vehicles now driving through the CHOP zone. Michelle, it has been quite the morning. And again, on the point of the dialogue moving forward, it'll be interesting to see how the city and how these protest leaders come to terms over the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, I think that it's been very clear that the message has been diluted and or lost in many cases, depending on who you're asking, who were a part of this process from the beginning. So the dialogue moving forward, we have talked to Andre Taylor, who lost his brother to a police shooting in 2016, and he's now on the governor's task force. He's also working with the mayor's office to create change and reallocating some money back into the community. So I do think that it is the message that we have heard this morning from a lot of folks is that the message was lost, and it's unfortunate that CHOP was dispersed on this low note. But at the same time, the message will go forward. There will be dialogue. Chief Carmen Best and the mayor have been very clear that they want to keep these conversations going, Jake.
4 minutes to the top of the hour, Michelle. We are all so glad that you joined us on King 5 Mornings and King 5 Mornings on Kong for the latest on the Capitol Hill organized protest, which ends today. Make July 1st a good one. We'll see you tomorrow morning.